like this new music. What is going on, everybody?
What's up, buddy?
Hey, I'm excited about this. We've been podcasting for a while, but this is the first official launch of the Smoke Bake Sear Hasty Bake Podcast.
Number one.
Hopefully.
Now, is it Smoke Bake Sear or is it Sear Bake Smoke?
Well, I mean, I think it's Smoke Bake Sear because Sear Bake Smoke just sounds weird to me.
Yeah. We decided to go up.
Have you noticed, though, that there's this period of history, and it still gets kind of wobbled in, where Hasty Bake, like one of the taglines ends up being grill bake smoke, and no one can figure out where the grill came from.
Yeah, it's never been a thing.
It's never been grill bake smoke. It's always been the bags,
Right.
Sear bake smoke.
Right.
Well, even on the old literature, it always said it sears, it bakes, it smokes, it broils. Like
It fries. Apparently, it fries. Grant loved the fact that it fried.
Well, he's talking about putting it in a fireplace. He's like, when you go hunting, you stay in one of those cabins, there's no cook stove. You just put it in the fireplace.
For the record, I've done that.
Oh.
I've taken one of the old portables. We were at Gaston's.
Yeah.
Took one of the old portables and put it inside. It worked out great. It was
Well, of course it works.
it's
obviously.
great. Right. Got a built-in chimney.
So, episode one.
Episode 1. Are we? I just want to confirm. Are we live? Can you see us on the internet?
I can see us on the interwebs.
Wait, wow.
Oh, no.
The world is here.
Yeah.
That's pretty exciting.
Episode 1, we figured why not kick it off with the only...
Don't make his head any bigger than it needs to be.
Well, I mean, as I like to describe him, the guy...
He's got to get out of this room. When
Yeah.
we're all...
The man that cooks on Hasty Bakes more than anybody
Yeah.
and probably has more experience than anybody.
I would go ahead and bet that you've probably cooked on Hasty Bakes more than Grant ever did his entire life in the last.
I don't know. He lived for a really long time.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, and imagine you're the salesman, you're the fabricator, you're the marketing genius.
I
Like,
still think you've probably
I still
got him
think
beat.
I think you got him beat, buddy.
I don't know.
I know you don't want to claim it,
Yeah.
but you got admit this. If you don't have him beat, you're damn close.
Well, how I live with myself is I think that Grant would come and hang out in my store every day and talk to people if he was alive.
Probably true.
Yeah.
For anybody who doesn't know who the beautiful face on the other side of this camera is, this is Adam Myers, CEO, president, pitmaster, janitor, plumber, bill payer, everything at the Burn Company, BurnCo in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
That's me.
We have been calling him lately the man, the myth, the legend.
That's right.
But realistically, to give the respect that it's due, we have these internal jokes when we're building grills and cooking back and forth, and talking about like techniques. And it normally is like, call Adam. He's probably done it 1,000 times.
Yeah. Yeah.
So even if it's not something you normally do, like I'm sure he's done it.
Right.
Like you sent me a video or posted a video, or I think you sent it to me a while ago of
Popcorn balls, yes.
yeah, right. No, frying donuts in an aluminum pan. I'm like, yeah, of course.
Right.
If anyone's going to fry a donut in an aluminum pan and a Hasty Bake, it's going to be Adam Myers.
It's definitely me. That's kind of my thing.
I love it, man. You got to keep it fresh, right? You can only cook so many pork butts, so much brisket, without injecting the occasional fried donut.
Well, the issue is if I show people the really fun stuff that I can do, then they want me to do more. Like you never do less. You always do more. Like macaroni and cheese was just proof that I could do a good macaroni and cheese only cooking on a Hasty Bake.
Right.
And then it became like...
You can just call up Benny Keith and they can drop off macaroni and cheese, but you won't do that. You will boil your own noodles over charcoal because you're freaking nuts.
Because I'm a crazy person.
Yes.
That's right.
Cooking, boiling water is the only thing a Hasty Bake does not do better than everything else.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Yet you still like to do that.
Well, because that would
you
mean...
don't like to do that.
That would mean bringing in something else, and if it's in there to boil water,
gonna get
then
used,
it'll get used for something else, and to keep it pure, it's fire only.
You can hire that kid and just put the pear burner on it.
That's right. Prove
Like
yourself.
an hour and a half. You're not going to do anything with that pear burner except maybe broil some cheese or something.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. Hey, guys, again, we are very excited to be having the first Sear Bake Smoke Bake Sear podcast.
Yeah.
I got to remember if we're going to continue to do it.
Yeah. We'll write it down.
We'll write it down. Put it real big on the wall.
It's my fault.
It
I
does-
apologize.
it doesn't help.
It's like the sign that I have on the wall back here that says push record button.
Yeah, that's there for a reason.
It's there for a reason. We've done a couple of these and we're like, man, that was so, my God, it's gone.
Yeah.
Fun. All right, so I want to kick off here with a couple of things. One of our goals of this podcast is to put a face to the names that are some Hasty Bake folks.
Yeah.
So folks that you guys interact with all the time on the grill community, people that have been part of Hasty Bake history, hopefully some of the employees and executive staff and stuff of Hasty Bake.
Right.
We want it to be super fun, story-wise, informative with, recipes and techniques and all that, full of history. I mean, we want it to be a bunch of different stuff. But what we really want it to be is you feel like you walk away from these podcasts and you know these guys a little bit better.
Yep.
And you feel comfortable with them. I mean, there's guys that frequent your restaurant all the time, and you know them enough to have a little bit of their backstory. And there's a lot of people. The grill community's doubled in size in the last 5 years.
That's crazy.
So there's a lot of people who
right.
See, a lot of people they're not in Tulsa.
Yeah.
So they don't get to experience your food. They don't get to meet you as a person. They don't know the history of you having worked here and everything else. So we just kind of want to give them a little bit of background.
We're going to change that tonight.
Change it tonight.
Yeah.
So.
Gonna open up like a beautiful lotus flower. Display my wares for all.
Adam's wares tonight are brought to you by whiskey.
We have the tissues just right there.
We do
off
have
camera.
Tissues, water, whiskey. We got everything you need, really.
Yeah.
And now that our bellies are full, because Adam can't go anywhere without bringing food.
And by food, we mean...
He rolls in about half an hour, 45 minutes ago, I guess now. And he goes, hey, I dropped some food off in the kitchen if any of the shop guys are hungry. So we cruised on in there before. And if you've ever seen like the steam pans that are like triple high, they're like loaded. He's got like 8 of those back there, stuffed with enough food to feed our shop for 4 days.
Yeah.
Because that's how he rolls.
Yeah.
There's a Cambro in the middle of the room when we got there. I'm like, oh, we're serious tonight.
So thank you for dinner.
There's a lot
And
more.
lunch and dinner and breakfast.
There's a lot more folks here than there was when I started, for dang sure. I mean, we could buy a bag of always saved chicken breast and feed every guy in the shop for 2 days on a bag of chicken breast. So
Absolutely. Well, Adam, give us a little bit of the backstory of born, raised, family. Where do you come from?
Sure. I was born here in Oklahoma. Lived here until I was 5. Family moved to Colorado for my dad's job, so we lived in the burbs of Denver.
What burb in Denver?
My dad lived in Broomfield, and Ma lived in Arvada. Okay. So I went to school in Federal Heights, which was kind of right in between.
Okay.
Killer school. So I got a good kidhood education.
Yeah.
And then I moved back to Oklahoma when I was 11. And to fish, because that's the only reason why I wanted to be back in Oklahoma was to fish.
Fishing's not good in Colorado, or just hard to get to, or not as many species.
You can only catch so many trout, bro.
Yeah,
I
love catching trout.
I'm sorry, trout fishermen, right? But I needed more variety.
You catch one trout, you catch them all. That's right.
I didn't say it. Yeah. So,
there's at least 5 species that you want to catch before you get sick of catching trout.
Right.
So, come back to Oklahoma. And I think it's around that time, at probably 12 years old, and not surprisingly around fishing, that I remember like my first very clear Hasty Bake experience. My dad's good friends had a lake lot, or lake house actually, up at Grand Lake. And we used to go up there on the weekends and hang out and fish. I remember he made these little red spicy sausages on his black metal box that sat out on the dock.
Yeah.
And it was kind of a weird cooker, because we were charcoal family, but we were just a little, not even the Weber kettle, like the hardware store little square guy,
Yeah. Everyone's first tailgater.
Yeah.
$15 at Walmart kind of thing.
There you go. So that's kind of the unit I grew up on. But this guy did these sausages, right? And as a kid, I was really, really picky kid, really, really picky eater, and I loved these sausages. And they were J.C. Potter hot links.
I was going to say, it sounds a lot
cooked on a Hasty Bake, and I remember watching him do it, and then. I was a natural kind of a firebug. I was. If we went camping, the first thing I wanted to do was collect firewood and start a fire.
Yeah, I think we're all that way a little bit.
Yeah,
that's what it draws it to us.
Yeah, it's childhood love of the tool, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, that was my first real experience. I remember thinking that this food tasted different than anything else I had ever had. Grew up in Catoosa, graduated from Catoosa. Went to school at TCC Rogers, moved to Stillwater, got married, had a family, did all this weird stuff. But the kind of in between stuff, after I graduated from high school, I needed a job, and that's what brought me to Hasty Bake. I was going to school at TCC, and I worked at a cell tower company in Veneta in the warehouse. Learned how to drive a forklift and, you know, build orders.
Forklift
and,
certified.
Yeah, well, I don't know if I was ever quality, certified. It was a long time ago.
That's
so.
a very loose term around here.
Yeah, so.
That's right.
So
these suckers don't know I'm forklift certified.
but we had lived up at Grand Lake. We moved up there when I was 16, and that's where I actually had access to a Hasty Bake. The house we moved into. For some reason, there's like a million Hasty Bakes at Grand Lake. It's like every person from Tulsa was like, I can't leave my Hasty Bake at home. I must bring it also to the lake, right? So there are a million Hasty Bakes floating around.
But if you ever want to cook on a grill, like if there's one place where you're like, I want to grill, it's going to be at the lake, man.
Right.
And for some reason, it just looks so nice on the patio, right? It's a perfect size.
Yeah.
It's like some guy really thought about it. Anyway.
I wonder if that's the same way like at Eufaula or something like that. Like I wonder if the ratio of bakes to other grills is significantly higher at Grand than it is at like some of the other lakes.
I would bet so.
I don't know why. I don't know if I want to read into that any more than I am, but I'm just...
If you live in another lake and see a lot of Hasty Bakes, let us know.
That's right. That's right.
Anyway, we had access to a Hasty Bake there, and I remember the first time my dad was like, go start the Hasty Bake, and so I got to go fire up the Hasty Bake. I never really had watched anyone, never really thought about it, and I went to go put the coal in, and I was like, oh, there's a little door here on the side. Like, this is kind of convenient. Like, it'd be a lot easier if this little box, like, came out. Like, oh, it does.
It does come
like,
out.
well, this is pretty awesome, Like, oh, he's got this chimney starter here. Like, maybe I should use this. I was like, if I just put the newspaper underneath it, I don't even need the chimney starter.
There you go.
Like, if only the fire was closer. What does this little crank handle on the side do? And like, literally in one cook, I was like, this is the greatest thing I've ever experienced in my life. So, I mean, I love to cook at home, and I had limited grill experience other than really kind of camping, but that's what kind of set the tone for Hasty Bake for me. So anyway, graduated from high school, need a job, go to the old job office with the job career lady, and she says, oh, the jobs are out there on the Rolodex file in the hallway, you know, and so you go out there and flip through the Rolodex file, warehouse jobs, it was one building furniture for, a pittance of like $6.50 an hour, and then a job at Hasty Bake, also for like $6.50 an hour, but I knew what Hasty Bake was, and my dad would be much prouder if I came home saying I worked at Hasty Bake than if I was assembling furniture somewhere. No offense to the furniture assemblers out there.
Jesus assembled furniture.
It is very, very, very worthy. So, this is in 1999, and if I'm going too fast for
you're doing great.
our podcast here, I don't know how to pace myself out.
I can slow it down when we post it online.
So
everyone listens to podcasts at different speeds anyway.
That's right.
So I call, and they said, oh yeah, come in for an interview. Can you come in on Saturday? I said, sure. Said the guy that hires for warehouse will be here, and so I show up, and I don't remember who was working the front desk. Said, oh yeah, you're here to see Bill, who is Richard's brother, who worked in the manufacturing portion. At that time, Hasty Bake was on 46th and just had a small retail showroom, and then spot welding and assembly were all done in the back. Didn't do all the sheet metal fab work that was all still done outside. So I went back in the back, and I think that Bill had just installed maybe some new pipes or maybe some new wheels on his badass Harley.
Okay.
So I go in for a job interview, and the guy who's interviewing me is literally revving his Harley, right? Like that he just put some parts on in the warehouse. I'm like, okay,
that still happens today.
This is a pretty cool place to work, like already out of the gate. And he does a pretty cursory interview. Are you familiar with tools? Can you show up for work? Do you have transportation?
The bare minimum.
Just did some.
Glad to see we've gotten better over the years.
My first job was cutting the axles for the wheels. I don't know if you guys still cut those with a chop saw or not, but we used to get 25-foot sticks.
I think they're using a bandsaw now.
So
potato.
It was measure, mark with a grease pen, chop with chop saw, grind ends off, right? For all of them. And then I had a jig I had to check them against because they're too short, the two wheels won't fit on. If they're too long, they look wonky, and people that spend $1,000 on a metal box will complain. So.
Right.
I did that, and
it's funny how some things never change.
I was gonna say, yeah.
That and push handles, and I showed up for work, and cleaned up after myself and did what I was supposed to do. And they said, "Oh, you know how to run a riveter." And I was like, "Well, sure, you can teach me."
Right.
You know, so I moved into assembly and started doing assembly. And then they saw me working on my Jeep in the parking lot after work. And said, "You're pretty handy with tools, aren't you?" And
Yeah.
I said, "Well, yeah." And I said, "Do you think you can build gas grills?" And so I started doing gas grill assembly and then going out and servicing gas grills. And then I think the first year I worked there, Rich had me do the fair. And he said, "You're going to work the fair, Myers." He said, "You get some extra hours. You know, it's in the evening." I said, "Well, what do I have to do?" He said, "Well, need to shave and get a haircut and get some different pants and a collared shirt." Like
You're like, "No, what do I have to do?" And he's like, "No, don't worry about that right now. It's
Yeah,
just about what you look."
change the way
I
that
just
you
need
look.
you to change all of this.
Because you know, in my Hasty Bake times, I was a much more professional looking person. I've definitely reverted back to my
Childlike
previous self.
dependencies.
Yeah,
That's right.
With my hat and the T-shirt and well, that's all you can see on the camera. So
Right.
anyway,
He's wearing boxers right now. It's weird, but we let it
And
roll.
a smile.
I'm sitting in an ice bath currently. So I cleaned up pretty good, and he wanted me to sell grills, and I had never sold anything. I was a kid.
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, how am I supposed to sell them?" He said, "Well, tell people about what you cook on them." And one of the really cool things about working at Hasty Bake was that Richard let us cook. Not trying to get things sideways with anybody now. I hope you guys still do it now, but he let us cook. And the
We
thought
just wait for you to show up with food.
the thought process being that if people were there to buy a grill, the smell of like cooking food
Right. Yep.
or a grill on fire is a really great selling point. So he was cool with that. I did it because I was poor. I was trying to put myself through college, working at Hasty Bake, and the other guys in the shop could all throw together and buy frozen chicken breast and a couple of bags of Always Save chips and like a couple 2 liters of soda.
The sum is always greater than the parts.
That's right.
And it was literally like $1.50 a day, you know,
Yeah.
and didn't have to clock out and go wait in line somewhere. You
Right.
know, it was a pretty quick lunch. I think Jason Miller maybe still does that to this day. Like
He waits for us to do it now.
super power
he
lunch?
usually
Okay,
shows up
okay.
like about the time that we pull stuff off. It's remarkable his timing whenever we pull stuff off, and I'm like, you hear the door crack, and I'm like, oh, look who's showing up.
You know, he has been doing it for a minute. So.
Yeah.
That's right.
He's one we need to get on here. Just
100%.
He's always entertaining. Jason Miller heads up our spot weld, and he's been here for 27.
Touched every
Yeah.
single Hasty Bake for 20 years.
Yeah.
Literally, if you've bought a Hasty Bake at any point in the last probably 25 years,
touched it.
Jason Miller spot welded your Hasty Bake for you.
Yeah.
And it's really funny how we will get some random thing we'd never seen before. And sometimes it's a grill, sometimes it's like, guy's got an issue with his lift mechanism, and he's sending pictures, and I'm like, what the hell is what? I've never
Yeah.
seen a lift mechanism
Yeah.
like that. And I'll take it over to Jace, and he'll be like, oh, yeah, we ran those from like 94 to 97. It was like a September run. It was kind of weird. We had a hard time getting parts, so we ended up doing this. And like, he knows every single thing that occurred,
yeah.
like in this. It's amazing.
Even better, he'll be like, oh, you know, for 3 weeks we ran out of this screw,
Right.
so we switched to these screws for those 21 days. And you're like,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah, saying he heads up our spot weld department is really kind of an understatement.
I
'cause,
agree.
That shop really would not run back there without
Right.
Miller having his hands everywhere he needs to have them.
Yeah.
Well, and you know, even when I started, that was the boss on the floor. Was Jason Miller was my boss on the floor, and he's the one that told me what to peel. I mean, because peeling plastic. Do you guys still peel plastic
Yeah,
here?
we do.
I mean,
Yeah.
we
we
don't.
don't.
Well, and the Hasty Bake in general.
Yes,
is still-
people do peel plastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a real job, and you have to be good at it because if you're slow or you do a poor
Oh, yeah.
job, it totally affects production. So that was kind of how Jason weeded out the folks that had it and didn't have it. So anyway,
sure.
we always used to pitch in, and there's 4 or 5 of us that would all throw down some dollars and buy lunch. And before long, I got to kind of be the regular dude doing it. So comes time to sell Hasty Bakes, and so I just start telling me, 42-year-old man now trying to buy a grill about 19-year-old kid cooking really good food on it. So
Right.
Apparently I was really good at selling the fact that I could cook delicious food, and I sounded like I knew what I was talking about, and I sold a lot of Hasty Bakes. So Rich moved me into sales, and I sold Hasty Bakes. And we moved here to this store, and I stayed here until 99 and or excuse me, started here in
Way
99.
early.
Yeah.
Started here in 99 and then opened the restaurant in 2011. So it's been 12-ish years since I've been an official HB employee.
Now, when you started here, Grant was still around.
Yeah.
You had the opportunity to get to know him a little bit. What was that like? What was your relationship like? What was he like?
So initially,
Grant, we're talking for anybody who's new. Grant, the founder of and inventor of Hasty Bake.
yeah, Grant Hastings and then a buddy, his Gus Baker. They were there. They were the dudes. Gus parted shortly after the company started, and it was just Grant. But he had no part in the operations of the business. Whenever I worked there, he was just kind of this old guy that would come in with really obscure Hasty Bake parts and need them fabricated. And it was and I knew who he was. I knew he was the guy who invented the grill, but it didn't all come together. And so he and I didn't have like a real relationship. I made parts for him, but I never talked to him about Hasty Bake or about what it was like to own it or start it or anything about it because. To me, it was, he started in 1948. Like, it's the year 2000.
You were a kid.
Like really 50 years ago.
Right.
I mean, do I want to talk to this guy? So, over the years of working at Hasty Bake, hearing stories about the things that Grant did, these parties that he threw, the cooking in the backyards of people, the lengths he would go to get somebody a Hasty Bake. Hasty Bakes being on The Price is Right, the Nudie Girl catalogs, right? Like all of these amazing stories about this man. And so, over the years, I kind of developed an affinity for him. Yeah. Still without a relationship, even. It was still like just a transactional relationship. And then when Mark Brown started doing the book with him, the Grilling Grant's Way cookbook, that's when we kind of became friends because Richard's like, "Hey Myers, I want you to take all these books over to Grant's
You do
house."
a really good Richard impression, by the way. Like your voice gets a little raspier and a little bit more demanding.
Yeah.
Well, he is my model, right? I don't really have another one. So, Rich, to you, buddy. Anyway, he said, "Myers, I want you to take all these books over to Grant's house so he can sign them." And I was like, "For who?" He's like, "Well, all the people all over the country that are bought a Grilling Grant's Way cookbook. Like Grant offered to autograph them all for us." I'm like, "So I have to take them to him and have him sign these books?" And so 20-something-year-old Adam was not super jazzed about this entire idea.
Right.
Now, granted, I love Hasty Bake. At this point, I've been traveling and doing outside sales work too.
I believe they call that indoctrinated.
So I had
Kool-Aid.
some experience in it. So anyway, I go over to Grant's house with these boxes of books and go into his room. He's in kind of poor health at this time. And, hey, to Sam and Susie, who've had a Hasty Bake since 1987, they live in Sarasota, Florida.
Oh, wow.
And
He wasn't just a signature.
No.
Personally.
It was he personally. I mean, it was it's a huge
Sarasota,
deal.
Florida.
Huge deal to him, right? So I am not jazzed about this. So probably 2 or 3 pages into this, he goes, "So how are things at Hasty Bake?" And without even thinking about it, I just start complaining about my job, right? I'm like, "Oh, man, I just went to Alabama, and I was selling against all these other guys, and they kept calling it a tasty bake oven, and then they kept asking me where the lights were and why it didn't plug in and didn't have a thermometer on it." And I was just complaining about struggling to sell Hasty Bakes, especially outside my region.
Right.
And he starts asking me questions. And he's like, "Well, what are you cooking?" And I was like, "Well, what do you mean?" He's like, "Well, what are you cooking at your demos?" And I was like, "Well, same thing everybody else is. We're doing cheese quesadillas, and we're doing sausages, and we're doing little hot wings and stuff like that." And he was like, "So you're doing the same thing everyone else is?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "So why would anyone want to talk to you?" I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He goes, "You need to open that grill up, and it needs to say something. It needs to say, this machine is here to do amazing things. We're going to change your life by buying this metal box."
Yeah.
You have to help them imagine themselves being you right now, revealing that to some strangers, right? All of this random deliciousness that is going on there.
Yeah.
And then he leads that question up with, can you cook, right? And now I'm like, yeah, I can cook. And he was like, do amazing things. Like what? I'm like, I can do acorn squash, I can do ribs, I can do turkeys and all kinds of stuff. And he's like, all right, I tell you what. He's like, come over to my house tomorrow. I got a Dixie bell. He's like, I'll call Richard and tell him that you're coming over to work with me and cook for me. Okay,
yeah.
Cool, just like it's a demo, but for Grant. So I'm like, okay, I do. Well, the whole time, like, I'm over there, he's talking to me about starting fires and about, how I'm putting my coal together and how many pieces of paper do I use if I use paper? And I'm like, it starts to really click. This is the guy that invented this thing. Like, this guy came up with this idea, he hustled it, he turned it into a brand that still exists, that literally has given me my entire livelihood, right?
Yeah.
And all these other weirdos that I hang out with that are.
And this is even before a restaurant or anything.
Yeah. This is just me working at Hasty Bake, right?
Crazy.
Like, and so I cooked for Grant at his house, and I remember leaving. And I went home to my wife, and I was like, I'm on to something. Like I can't believe I didn't talk to Grant before. Like, I'm trying to sell a product that he invented. Like, he's part of the invention of this entire industry.
Right.
He starts talking to me about, Adam, do you realize that, nobody used the word grilling, right? Like you braziered a steak, an open top fire.
Right.
And then you pit barbecued stuff, right? Or there were smokehouses. But like the idea that people cooked over fire for fun was savage, Like that's only something that poor people who couldn't afford electricity or gas did previous to what we consider like the backyard grilling industry that really kind of sprung up after World War II. So anyway, I began to take Grant for what he is. He then asked me to come to Hasty Bake and do a multiple grill demo, like I would be on site for one of our offsite out of town deals. Can you cook on multiple grills, right? Can you really show it off? And so I do, right? And he's like sitting in a chair because he's in really poor health, right?
Yeah.
He's sitting in a chair, like orchestrating. He's like, "Do you talk about this? Like, you talk about this? Like,
That's
why do you know why you use this smoking wood over another smoking wood, right? Like, so I go on so I had to come pitch it to Richard, right? I'm like, hey, look, can I spend another, $150 buying, ribs and doing a ham and buying all this other stuff? And I want to make breakfast for the staff. I think I went to American Propane, which is one of our dealers down in Oklahoma City. Jim Grigsby, super cool dude. Hope you're still alive, Jim. And he said, why do you want to do breakfast for? I said, well, the salespeople out there, they really know their customers well. And I don't have an end to them. Like, they don't care about me. I'm just a salesman here for the Grill Stravaganza. And Grant said if I cooked for him, like made him breakfast, like that would give them a reason to talk about me. He said he used to do it all the time, and we're just like, okay, whatever. You have to sell, 2 more Hasty Bakes to cover the extra expenses of you doing this stuff. Qualify it with some sales, and you can do it, Myers, right? So on Grant's advice, I totally do, and it totally works. I sell more grills, right? Like, so I start doing that, and I report back to Grant, and he's like, all right, well, after you sell a guy a grill, what do you offering him? I was like, well, what do you mean? He said, well, if a guy wasn't awesome at grilling and he bought a $1,000 Hasty Bake, all his friends and family all know that he spent $1,000 on a metal box that does nothing. And if he sucked at cooking, buying the Hasty Bake is not going to instantly change him overnight. He's like, you need to offer cooking classes, teach people how to do it. He said, I used to sell a guy a Hasty Bake, and I'd come to his house and cook for a party. That's crazy. As a way to, he goes, and then I'd close 3 more Hasty Bake sales at the party, right, to this guy's friends. So, like, no offense, Amway, but, the old relationship type of sale, right? Like, have a party, have your friends over, having a good time. They imagine themselves doing
a new business opportunity for you.
There we go. So,
and then if you get 3 people under you.
And then.
So it took a little while to convince Richard to just pay for the 101s. And the 101 class was because, the biggest problems we faced as a salesman was that folks had trouble starting fires, folks had trouble maintaining temperatures, and folks had trouble making basic food items the way that they wanted them.
Glad to see things have changed.
Yeah, exactly. And so, the thing about food is it's extremely subjective. Every single person has their own.
It's like art.
Yeah, it totally is.
Yeah.
And so the goal wasn't to teach somebody this is how you're supposed to cook a hamburger. It's to teach them how to cook the kind of hamburger that they want.
Right.
And if you do that and make them happy and make their friends and family happy, then you're going to sell more Hasty Bakes. And so that's when we started doing the classes. All the classes that Hasty Bake offered before that were all done by outside chefs and pit masters and other badass humans. That's where I got like people want to know, where did you get your clout? Like, who did you train under? What did you do?
Yeah.
Well, I worked here and awesome.
Train under Grant Hastings.
Yeah.
Well, it was Ken Schaefer from the Boston Deli, right? When people were like, "Oh, you're the Hasty Bake OG," like, no, there's Ken Schaefer,
Sure.
like Tim Fitz that used to be over at Southern Hills. Three Guys Smoking used to do a bunch of classes. Paul Kirk, the Baron of Barbecue, and so I used to sit in on all these classes and just mooch, back when
just soak it up.
Yeah, when barbecue was like some lame thing that weirdo guys did, on the
So
on
this
the
was
weekends.
before the Barbecue Pitmasters TV show that
That's right.
turned on.
Before that, way before that. And so just hanging out with cool people and then reading like a million cookbooks. So anyway, after Grant kind of opened those things to me, it kind of changed the dynamic of how Hasty Bake was being run again, and kind of on like a full circle tilt, because grilling was becoming popular at a time when Grant was innovating and entering the industry. And, Hasty Bake again now, I mean, I always likened barbecue to bass fishing. And 10 years ago, I said, you just wait. I said, there'll be TV shows, there'll be big money circuit, just like the bass fishing when I was a kid. Nobody made a living bass fishing but Bill Dance and Roland Martin and Jimmy Houston. Can't forget Jimmy Houston, especially they're not from Oklahoma.
Yeah.
So, but now, I mean, there's college series for it. So, as the cool hobbies move, so does things. So anyway, I just talked for a really long time. I don't think you guys said anything.
Well,
so.
before
We said a lot of yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Oh, wow.
But
Apologize.
Before we move on, I do want to say, if you haven't read that, it's
The Grill and Grant's Way book?
It's a cook. People all the time dismiss it as a cookbook, and it is outstanding.
Well, so this is what I'm going to caveat it with, is if you see it on the shelf, I don't know who designed the cover. I don't think it was you.
Right.
It's not a very attractive looking book.
Not.
And 10, 15 years ago, maybe that was the thing. It's not a very attractive looking book.
Right.
I don't know who designed it. If whoever designed it, which you probably know designed it, is listening tonight. I'm sorry.
I want to say maybe Grant picked out the picture.
Well, that might have been why.
Right?
So I dismissed that book for like 10 years.
So I did the same.
It wasn't until I started working here, and I don't remember if it was you. It might have been. I think it was you, because you and I were talking. You know what it was? It was you during COVID. We swung down and we're talking at your shop in Jenks, and you said something like, "Man, we need to do something," because you noticed we've been doing some videos, and you're like, "We need to do something sometime where we read some of the Grant cookbook stuff." And I knew we sold the book, and I'm like, "Oh, that'd be cool."
Yeah.
And I left Jenks and drove back up here and grabbed one off the shelf, and I started thumbing through it. And an hour later, I'm like, "Where the hell did my day go?"
Yeah.
And it came home with me that night, and it sat by my chair, and I read it every day for 5 or 6 days and cover to cover. And I was blown away because the recipes are cool.
Yeah.
But the recipes are almost sidelined compared to the stories.
That's like the B side of it.
If you have, like you said, if you have not read this book, and this is not a pitch to sell the book by any means,
it's
but for a while the book didn't sell very well for the last couple of years. It hasn't been very hot, and there's this thing maybe we won't get it reprinted, and I'm like, no, we're going to redesign the cover and reprint the damn thing because it's that good.
Yeah.
There's stories about kidnapping in there, and about dogs stealing food off of grills, and about all this crazy stories that you look back at Grant's life and the stuff that he chose to share in the book. I'm sure there's so much more that didn't fit in the book, and it reads like you would imagine this crazy movie.
Yeah.
I mean, right?
My life is not that different.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah,
it really is. There's
great.
just some really unbelievable stories that after reading that, I had this whole different appreciation for Grant and for our history, and I mean, it's a really cool thing to just rest on as employees of the company, but also just fans of the product itself. It's really neat to know there's this crazy amount of history that goes into this little product that we like and we enjoy. And like you said, like you've built a career around it. We built a career. We built our hobbies. I mean, I work for Hasty Bake, and what do I do on my weekends and my free time? I cook on the damn thing that I make every day.
Right.
So that comes from this massive history about this guy that really is larger than life and all the things that kind of fed into it.
A guy that cooked starlings over an open fire in a cave as a kid. I mean, I read that story and I was like, oh my gosh, me too. But it wasn't a cave. It was a fort made out of tin, you know?
Right.
Like, but same thing, like built a fireplace, you know, in the fort, and we used to cook things in the fireplace in the fort. And like, I really felt connected to Grant through those stories. And I feel like most people that like cooking with real fire, like, have those types of stories as a kid, you know, where maybe you got in trouble for having a fire at your fort, maybe more than once, you know. Like,
maybe burn down said fort. No, it's great, and some of the recipes are just fun too. Like there's one I think it was a trout recipe that I love, where the instructions of the recipe are like, find an old T-shirt.
Yeah.
And I'm going like, where is this going?
Okay, I got it.
So if you're in for a really entertaining read, I think we have it on the website. We obviously have it here in the store. I am going to be this year looking into having that reprinted. Just because it's honestly, I know you were part of the kind of the building of that book during that era. It's a part of history. Like I'm so convinced that we have to save and we have to make known.
I think it'd be really cool to cook through some of the recipes. You know, I mean, he talks about fishing in strip pits. I mean, there's just a lot of connection, like to Tulsa. I mean, there aren't a lot of products that are uniquely Tulsa that have been kind of in the same lineage of what the brand is supposed to look like.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm trying to think of another one. Maybe Wyman Iron. You know, would be like
they're probably one of
the.
You have those. You have like the Bama.
Bama.
Those kind of classic companies. But it's what I love about Tulsa being the big small town that we are is you don't have 1,000 of those companies.
Right.
You have maybe 10 or 15 of them.
Yeah.
And they're still around, and they're still, in a lot of ways, doing things the same way. And I think that that's a little bit of a throwback to this middle America, blue collar type of thing that Tulsa still really has going for it.
Yeah.
I mean, for as white collar as some of the oil and gas stuff is, like, it's still a blue collar industry, right? And the money in Tulsa is founded on blue collar and founded on these companies that have this long-standing, relationship with the area and with the people that are in the area. I mean, you can't, one of my favorite expressions when I moved here is you can't swing a dead cat and not hit a, whatever it is, Sonic or whatever it is. Right? You can't swing a dead cat and not hit someone who's worked for one of these iconic companies.
Right.
I mean, and we run into people all the time. And they'll be like, oh, I worked for Hasty Bake back in 1970, whatever, back in 1980, whatever, or my dad did, or this or that. Like, everyone has a tie to this company that's been here forever.
Yeah.
Or they got gifted a Hasty Bake for a wedding gift, right? Like I still, if some people, can't say everybody, some people, whenever they sort out and kind of like become a full-grown adult human, like to me, that's one of the most precious gifts I can give someone.
Sure.
Yeah, I agree.
Oh, absolutely.
Grant used to have guys in these oil and gas companies that, every family member or friend or anyone who got married or bought a house or had a kid, they're like, one of those things triggered, they gave him a Hasty Bake. And like, look, this is going to be something that's going to make memories with you and your family that you're going to pass down, forever. So
it's a big investment, for that type of gift. But I feel like there are very few things in life that we give as gifts that can kind of be. I may be exaggerating, but I don't think I am.
We all love Hasty Bakes so much.
I know, right? Just buttering it up.
That's
right. No, it's
if you
so.
don't love
I
your
think
kid.
I think of it like one of my favorite things to give guys that like I'm in their wedding line or something like is a really good knife.
Yep.
And sometimes it may be like a really good Benchmade knife, and sometimes it may be like a really good chef's knife, depending on what I know that they do. But there's something I remember. Someone gave me a really good knife one time as a gift.
Yep.
And it was one of those like, does this mean I'm a man now?
Yeah.
Like, I just got something that's like, I would never go buy this for myself. I now own something that's like way more expensive than I would just go invest in, because I wouldn't have a problem going and investing in that $20 hardware store pocket knife.
Right.
But someone just gave me a $150 pocket knife, and now I have to take care of it. Yeah. And I got to make sure it's sharp, and I got to make sure it doesn't rust. It's one of those things where there's a certain kind of thing like that in life that you pass the mantle on.
Yeah.
And for those of us who find a lot of joy and fulfillment in cooking, and being the Hasty Bake podcast, we're gonna acknowledge this, but really in life it's anything that's like, this is a hobby that's changed my life.
Right.
I want to give you the opportunity to have your life changed by it. And there's some of those people, like, they're going to get a Hasty Bake, and for 10 or 15 years, they're never going to know how to cook on it. And
Right.
that's a bummer, but that definitely happens. But for anybody who gets that gift and they're like, I've always wanted one of these, or I've always tasted the food off of one, and then they get that experience. And I have so many people that come into the store and they're like, someone just gave me this, like, I don't know how to use it. And I'm like, hey, we got some cooking classes.
Right.
You know, we do a 101 that we got videos online. It's all these different ways, because we always say around here, like, no one benefits from bad barbecue.
Right. Yeah.
So the best thing you can do with someone after you sell them a grill, like you just thought, is teach them how to use it.
Right.
Because Hasty Bakes make babies.
That's
right.
right.
And if you know how to use it, like, you're going to show other people, and they're going to want to use it, and they're going to want to buy one. And from a sales perspective, that works great.
Right.
But also from the perspective of, like, if you have a Hasty Bake in your backyard and you burn everything you cook on it, like, people are going to be like, that's gross. So, like, would I not want everyone using our product to actually know how to use our product well?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I love it, man. Okay, so let's fast forward a little bit.
Shoot.
Work for Hasty Bake for a while. You get a bug to start cooking more than just occasionally for demos and stuff like that.
Well, it was because of those things. I mean, because I was doing the cooking classes and because I was doing demonstrations that, you know, I finished a class and a guy is like, hey, it's my brother's birthday next weekend. Like,
Can I hire you?
that brisket was really good. Like, can you make a brisket for me? You know, and so it started out as just, you know, it was mostly Richard's friends usually at first.
Still
like,
is to some extent.
hey, well, Myers cooked this for me, you know. And
some things never change.
Yeah.
and it just kind of
we have around here we call them FORs.
Yeah.
Friend of Rich.
Yeah.
Like, what's going on with this ticket right here? Yeah, that's an FOR deal.
glad to see.
Why did we
that-
get committed to this catering? That's an
Yeah.
FOR
Oh,
thing.
hey, I love consistency. You know, in the
right.
barbecue world, that's what it takes is some consistency. So, no, I was doing that, and people were asking me to do it, and you know, I was very fortunate. Richard was very good to me and allowed me the latitude to be able to go to college, and whenever I was living in Stillwater. Going to school at Oklahoma State, ran out of money, and so I had to come back to Hasty Bake to try to make some money because in Stillwater there were no full-time jobs to make any kind of money at all. So, so I called Richard and said, hey, you know, you need me to work some weekends or anything? He said, yeah, no problem. And I came to town. He said, what's going on? And I said, hey, I can't finish my last semester of school. Like, you know, so I'm going to come back and work for you full-time until I can get some money. And he said, Myers, take night classes. Promise me you'll work for me for a year after you graduate, and I'll pay for your last 12 hours of school. So
That's awesome.
I apologize to anybody else who works here that he probably won't do that for you, right?
Yeah.
But it was way back in the day, and I was really desperate, and he really helped me out.
I'll say, pause that, because I do want to say, yours is definitely not the only story.
No.
Okay.
I've heard that. So
Definitely.
we like to razz Rich around here because
Yeah.
everyone razzes their own boss.
Right.
But I will tell you, I've talked to probably a dozen people over the years.
Yeah.
And they all have a similar, I was going through this thing in life, or my marriage was doing this, or my car broke down, or whatever. And it's always like, hey, Rich was there.
Yeah.
So
Well-
we like to smack him around a little bit, but that's the kind of thing he'll do.
Loyalty is one of my 3 core values.
Yeah.
So, anyway, I went to school for management. I wanted to own my own manufacturing business, like not unlike Hasty Bake, honestly. You know, I mean, I spent all of my adult life like around it. I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to make really good, durable, you know, locally made products. But, you know, like Grant said, the problem with that is you're only going to sell a guy one stainless steel gourmet in a lifetime, right? Unless he's got friends, you know, or a lake house. So, so that model was always kind of lousy. And, turns out that if you make really delicious food, the demand is high, and
They want it the next day too.
it gets destroyed. Yeah, and they want it the next day. So like food is kind of like you know, I still look at it as manufacturing. You know, I never worked in a restaurant proper before I opened Co. So anyway, I had a management degree. I worked here for Richard for another I don't know, half dozen years or so. I mean, stayed longer.
He got his year.
I definitely got my year, but I loved it. I loved the work, and but I was kind of ambitious and wanted to do something on my own. But this is kind of all I knew. And people were trying to offer me money to be able to cook food for them. Well, why can't I design a business plan like for that? And so my cousin, Robbie, we're 11 days apart. We're really close as kiddos. We're very different people, but we have the most fun in the whole entire world. Rob, I miss you. Let's have fun sometime. He and I were hanging out together and doing these catering gigs and stuff. And he had a ton of experience in the restaurant industry, and I had zero. I worked with Nick the Greek in the trailer at the fair a couple of times, and done some cooking class stuff out here. But I really had no traditional restaurant background, and so Robbie and I worked together and designed a business plan for a super awesome Hasty Bake only restaurant. We decided the Hasty Bake only because that kept us focused on what we thought made the food superior, which was cooking over real fire.
Right.
We weren't going to do French fries, right? Because Hasty Bake didn't do French fries better than everybody else, right? We weren't going to do mashed potatoes because we didn't boil water, So we kind of limited what we could offer, but it also ensured that everything that we were doing was in this very kind of authentic way.
Yeah.
So, designed an awesome business plan, sitting actually in Oscar's Gastropub, which is 2 restaurants before I went in at 18th in Boston. I actually used that building as a model for the business plan. Like, in my perfect world, I would be in this building in this part of Tulsa. It would be this big with this kind of layout. Yeah. And so we farmed the business plan around, and people said, cool business plan, like really good job, but you guys have no capital and no collateral and no ownership experience. So like
who in their right mind would invest in that?
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
Like everybody thought it was stupid. I tried to get Richard to do it. I was like, Richard, like you've always wanted somebody to do a Hasty Bake restaurant. Like, why not me? And he was like, Myers, you can't run a restaurant, And I was like, I don't know. Like, so anyway, even him, I pitched it to him too, right? And he said same thing. Great plan, but you have none of these things, right? Good luck. So we talked about it. We said, you know what? We can start a catering business and carry insurance and do on-site catering as a way to kind of do a proof of concept, right? So instead of having like a catering outfit where we like cook everything, like take it out there, like we just show up at your house and cook delicious food. So we did that and worked our regular jobs. Richard let me borrow equipment. Of course, a lot of them were his friends too that were hiring me to be able to do this stuff. So eventually it got to a point where we had enough money to jump off. So we took our stupid little trailer and modified it and went over on 11th Street.
I love it. Where did the name BurnCo come from?
So my big thing about marketing and naming things is I don't want to get pigeonholed for something, and I feel like a lot of barbecue restaurants like use the name of a barbecue, a part of an animal or somebody's name in it, and I didn't want it to be about that. I wanted it to be about cooking real food on real fire. And if I say barbecue something, because we're not called BurnCo BBQ, like the official name is just BurnCo.
Your Instagram is
what?
But the barbecue.
I don't know who created it.
The barbecue definitely came after.
After the fact.
Yeah, I don't think Instagram.
I mean, at some point you have to
invented.
define yourself in some way.
Well, and the thing was, we really didn't know, because at that time we were like a fire caterer. Like we would do smoked salmon and acorn squash and
your acorn squash recipe I still use that all the time.
It's my Aunt Waltina's. I mean, who can go wrong with that much butter?
Much butter. Honestly, that was the first thing I ever cooked on a Hasty Bake.
Really?
Because I figured this is a really low cost of entry point. So
the butter costs more than the squash.
The butter costs more than the squash itself. So I did a couple of those, and I'm like, all right, I didn't screw that up too bad. Maybe I can move on to something
There you
else.
go.
But
I'd use Kerrygold now, but back then.
There you go.
So that's where we're trying to think of a name, and Robbie didn't like his name. I didn't like mine, and we're going to use our names. We thought about using some of our family's names for a name. How about calling it Short and Talls or Tall and Shorts or something weird. So we decided to have
Biggie Smalls.
Yeah. Well, I mean, remember
That name has no staying power.
this is the year 2010-ish, right? So, actually 2009. Anyway,
Should have gone with Taylor Swift.
So we went over to his house, and I said, look, in school, whenever we're solving problems, like first thing we do is we brainstorm. So like, let's just spit out every single name we could possibly think of. We'll write them all down, not good or bad, and then we'll look through them all and pick one. And so I still have the piece of paper that we did that on with all the different weirdo names. There's like over 50 different names on there.
That's awesome.
And the very first one on there is BurnCo.
What?
Which was the worst name ever because everybody told me it was a terrible name for a barbecue restaurant. Like, it doesn't even sound good. And I was like, I guess it really doesn't sound good, does it? Like, they said, it sounds like everything's burnt. And I was like, well, that's because, like, we cook everything on fire. Like, the food isn't burnt. Yeah. So no one really understood the name. Richard was like, that's a dumbass name, Adam. And you're talking about the guy that owns the Hasty Bake, right? Like, which is another terrible name.
The inventor himself said this was a horrible name.
Yes, Greg Hastings said Hasty Bake was the terrible. He wished he would have called it something else, right? The Smoke Master 5000. But, sometimes you just name things for weird reasons. So I just wanted a name that didn't really mean anything, and it turned out to mean something after a while. Lots of people asked me it's a really cool name, and I'm like, I thought it was a terrible name when it first came out. Like I remember we had matchbooks printed up, and I was passing them out. That's what we did instead of business cards, right? Yeah. It's a business card, but also useful. So people were like, BurnCo, that's a weird name, Oh gosh.
But I think after you get over the initial that's kind of weird and funny.
Yeah,
it's cool.
Well, I think once you kind of understand our brand, then it makes a lot more sense. We moved to 18th and Boston and brought the Hasty Bakes inside, and people could really see what was going on.
Yeah, for sure.
That was a big part of from doing cooking demonstrations that people really enjoy watching the process, and they feel like it's extremely authentic whenever they would show up, for a cooking demo, and my Hasty Bakes were cold, and I lit them on fire, and all the meat was in the packaging, and I did it all.
I still do demos like that, and it still blows people away.
It blows their mind because they can't believe that you're that open with the whole process. So when we moved to 18th in Boston, it opened up the whole kitchen, and I had customers that had been in there for 3 or 4 years that would come and go, you really don't have any other equipment in here. It's just all Hasty Bakes. And I'm like, yes. Well, I always knew that, but I just never really thought about it, And no, what you see is exactly all there is. It's not like behind a wall there's a chef mic, I've always prided myself, and there is no chef mic, right? There is no stove. There is no fryer. There is no toaster. There's no nothing but a bunch of metal boxes on fire. So,
man, that's cool. I remember the first time that I had BurnCo, and it was over there off of 15th, and buddy.
11th.
11th.
It's all right.
Jeez, man.
Somebody will correct you online.
Yeah, somebody. Yeah.
On 15th, you get fancy.
Yeah.
You got to get down there in the ghetto on 11th.
Thank you. Give me my props. Ed's Hurricane Lounge, still cranking, baby. Yeah.
But I remember my buddy was like, dude, we got to go to this place. We got to get there early. And so I was like, all right, what are we thinking? It was
like 11?
Yeah, I was like 11, and he was like, no, we got to go before that. So I think we got there at 10:15, and we were not first in line. And one of my favorite things that I love to tell people is, so we go through, and I remember you're there handing out ribs to everybody standing in line. So that's already who does that? And so everybody has ribs. So now you're rethinking the whole menu because you just had the rib, and you're like, well, now I want the ribs. But
They do that to brisket now, but have you seen the price?
Yeah. But
here's some chicken.
One of my favorite things about
Bologna,
that about that place is I remember we're sitting down, we're eating, and we're barely just done. And I don't remember who it was, but she comes up to us and she was like, hey, is everything good? And we're like, oh, yeah, everything's great. And she was like, are you done? And we're like, oh, yeah, I think we're done. And she was like, she didn't say it this way, but basically she's like, good, can you leave, please? And we're like, oh, yeah. She's like, because there's all these people just with
sitting with trays. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, we could take orders and sling food faster
and
than
it
people
was,
could eat.
It was, that's when I knew. I was like, man, they're onto something here. So,
yeah.
When we first opened on 11th Street, we were cooking in a trailer in the alley. There wasn't really any infrastructure in that outfit, and it was a cooler and a little small dish pit area, and we had a little order counter. I think we had maybe seating for 30-ish people in there. And we first opened, and things were moving along. Friends and family starting to come in. We didn't have a sign. Right?
What year did you open?
We opened in 2011, January 22nd, 2011, I believe, and it was like a week before a huge snowstorm, right? So
Like literally, that was Snowmageddon.
Yeah.
Yes, it was. It was. I had a Hasty Bake in front of the store on fire, just smoking, so that those other weirdos who had power or who were driving around would like pull in, like, you guys have some food? I'm like, I totally do.
We're literally the one place that does.
that's right.
So
I think that was we got like 18 inches in 12 hours.
yeah,
or something that storm. Crazy.
It was terrible. The trailer was extremely cold.
Yeah.
I was totally second guessing my entire move. I think I almost called Richard and was like, okay, like I was
I'm
just
coming
kidding
back.
about this. Like, it's take a little
Can
break.
I come cut axles again, please?
Yeah. Like, I'll do anything. You need some old grills refurbished. So, but I think in like March maybe of that year, Scott Cherry used to be with the Tulsa World. I had known him through a couple of deals with Hasty Bake here, and he showed up in the store, and I didn't notice him until he was already sitting down. And I walked over and talked to him, and I was like, oh, cool. Like, you coming out, check me out? He's like, yeah. He's like, I'm going to do a review on you. And I was like, oh, crap. Like, I didn't even, this is a part of owning a restaurant. Like, people are going to show up and, like, do a review.
Right.
Like, oh, my gosh. I didn't, was this food good? Like, holy crap. Like, I didn't even look
have
at
a
it.
do-over?
Like,
What did you have?
oh, I'm so bad at this already. So, I don't think I paid much mind to it. And one day we went to go set up the front. We just set the front at 9:45 or 10 o'clock in the morning, and there were these guys standing out in front of the store. And that was kind of an interesting strip center over there.
Yeah.
There are a lot of free-range human beings. I thank you again, Eddie Trice, for
Free
everything
range,
you've done.
organic.
So,
Farm fresh.
I just use the free
range,
range
free range,
humans.
I like it.
They
Farm
don't.
to
We
table.
get a couple free rangers around here every now and then.
So I go to the door and I crack the door open and I'm like, hey, what's up, fellas? And they're like, hey, what's going on? Like, you open yet? And I was like, no, we don't open till 10:30. And they're like, cool. And I was like, are you guys here for the barbecue? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, well, why are you here now? And they're like, well, we just read the review in the Tulsa World in the paper, right? This is back when newspaper is still a real thing, right? Like, Tulsa World, hey, keep it up.
Yeah.
So,
They're trying.
So that first day, like, we opened the door and like there's a line out the door and we sold out of food in like 30 or 40 minutes. And I remember Robbie and I like, oh man, like this is awesome. I think that's the first day that we like went to Sam's and bought 2 days of food at once instead of just 1 day of food. So like we might just be okay if this keeps up. And the next day there was 30 guys standing out front.
Yeah.
And the next day there's 50 guys standing out front. And so it just started getting kind of crazy, and it's that biggest small town ever.
Yeah,
everyone wanted to come and check it out.
That groundswell.
It was just crazy, I couldn't believe it, and we didn't even do ribs. I mean, the OG menu was brisket, pork, chicken tenders. I did a 3-piece chicken tender sandwich, hot links, Eckrich smoked sausage, poles because you can never go wrong with that. And then we did baked beans and chips and then cans of soda. And I think a barbecue sandwich was $4. And I think I did with a side and a drink for $6. And that's what we opened up with.
This wasn't that long ago. I mean, this was 10 years ago.
Yeah. Well,
12 years ago, I guess.
I mean, brisket was $1 a pound,
Yeah.
I mean, I felt like I was really getting one over at a $4 brisket sandwich, so.
Oh, we're so
Now we're
screwed.
like, that'll be $14.
No, it totally is. Yeah. It totally is.
Yeah.
Like, not joking. So, so that kind of, kicked that stuff off. And
I do find it interesting too, and you can pick on Scott Cherry or not, but like the power that a review has.
Yeah.
Because Scott or whoever decided to review you that day, who had any kind of a following, could have just as easily been like everything was drying off.
Yeah.
And That was the end of BurnCo
Right.
BBQ.
Yeah.
It totally could have gone that way, right?
And not that you have, I mean, honestly, not that you probably haven't had those days where you're like, everything sucked today, man. Like, fires got out of hand, meat selection was crap, like everything was dry, and just thank God that they didn't come by on that day.
Yeah.
Life is beautiful.
Yeah.
Sometimes you eat the bear, sometimes the bear eats you.
Right.
All of those things. So
It's nuts, man. We did Clint and I went and did a barbecue tour. I think it was last year down in Texas. Went to, I want to say 16 places in 3 days on the Texas, top 50 monthly. And the last place we went to was Goldie's, and they gotten number one on Texas top, on the monthly.
Yeah.
Some of the worst barbecue we had that entire trip. And the entire time, for the first hour, I'm like, this is unbelievable. Like, how in the world?
Right.
It just slowly hit me. I'm like, I think we had to have hit it on a bad day.
Yeah.
Because you don't get that kind of honor, especially with Texas Monthly.
Sure.
Without multiple people visiting you and there being some kind of continuity of okay, everyone agreed that this is the spot, right?
there are a lot of advertising dollars. Did I say that out loud? Sorry.
Wait, there it is.
Yeah.
There we go.
But no, seriously. But realistically, I think I hit it on a bad day. And I know that because as someone who did catering for years and years, there's caterings I've been really, really proud of, and there's caterings I'm like, whoa, I hope they cut me a check by the time we're done with this, right? Like, I'm glad I got that deposit before we finished. And I'm sure you're the same. Like, you cook some days and you're like, not our best work.
Yeah.
Like, we served the best thing we could today, and this is not the normal, but there's some days where the meat's bad or the fires got crazy or we hired the new guy to do something and he just didn't perform. And I mean, you roll with what you got to do,
I like to think that there are more, if you stick around for a while, it's because there are more of those hits than there are the misses,
100%.
right? Like, luck is defined as preparation meets opportunity,
Yeah.
And
you didn't get lucky the day Scott came by.
There you go,
Yeah.
right? That's the luckily we were doing a good job, and opportunity came along, and things hit just right, right? Now again, it could have hit in an exact different way. So those are those things that that's one of those really cool things in Tulsa that Tulsa did, right?
Yeah.
Like it started a wave of demand for what we were doing, and then we ran ribs as a special, and I was so deathly afraid because ribs were so expensive and took up so much space on the grill that we were going to start running ribs, and it was good. We were going to go backwards, because we have our nut every day. Right? Like, we got to make this amount of sales to be able to be on the right side of the world. So
to show up tomorrow, we got to make this.
Exactly right.
Yeah, if we're closed tomorrow, we screwed up.
Right.
So ribs were really scary,
and ribs are very. I mean, people are very opinionated about their ribs.
They're super opinionated, and if you sell somebody, a $15 order of ribs and they're not what they want, you are going to hear about it.
Yeah,
right.
For sure. I mean, still to this day, you're still going to hear about it.
So, I wanted to make sure that we sold them all, and so the way that I did that, because I would be like, "Hey, we have ribs on special," and they come through and they're like, "Oh no, I think I'll do a brisket sandwich." Right. I was like, "Damn it!" Like, looking at these ribs sitting there. And so I just hack off the end ribs, right? Like, I'm not going to serve these anyway.
Yeah.
Like, here, try this. And they take a bite, like, oh, I'll take the rib special today. And that's what jumped it off. And so we still do that to this day. And all but the craziest of times, we pass out end ribs to every single person that comes through. And it's a way of, if there's a long line, it's a way of kind of disarming people's hangry, right? And it gives them an idea of what the profile of our barbecue is. I walk up to people all the time like, hey, would you care for an end rib? And they're like, what is this? And I'm like, I'm giving you some food to try.
Right.
And if it sucks, you can throw it in the trash and leave, and it didn't cost you anything. And they're like, usually they laugh.
Right.
Unless they're not those people, and they look at me really strange, and they're like, "So it's free?" And I'm like, "Yes, it's free."
Yeah.
Like, but why is it
I add
free?
it to your bill when you get to the front door.
But people are just amazed that I am, and it's just a way of kind of welcoming people. I think it's a very Oklahoma thing to do, to be like, hey, you know, kind of the way the old school steakhouses in town used to bring out a cabbage roll and a tabbouleh and a steak or a rib and a
If you're not
bologna.
from Oklahoma, tabbouleh is the thing we eat here.
That's right.
No one knows why.
That's right. But we do.
I think there were a lot of Lebanese and Armenian immigrants that came over this
At
way.
some point, man. It's like the Czech in Texas. It's the Lebanese in Oklahoma.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know, but there were a lot of great steakhouses here in Tulsa that used to kind of be a thing, and that's one of those things that I remember as a kid. Those were my dad's favorite restaurants to go to because when we showed up, he's like, "Hey, they give you something as soon as you hit the table, right? They take your drink order, and when they bring your drinks, they also bring this appetizer. Right. And so, like when
it's like breadsticks at Olive Garden.
That's right.
Used to be or something. Right. I don't know. Do they still do those?
I mean, I think they do.
Does anybody go to Olive Garden? You just order from the app? Do they sell everything?
If you go to Olive Garden and you get the breadsticks, you got the best thing on the menu.
You're correct, because everything else is made in the microwave. Let's be real clear.
In the sous vide. Sous vide.
We don't call it sous vide.
It's a rehydrolyzer.
It's the rehydrolyzer.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great, man. So here's the question then. So you're talking about ribs. You did baby backs, which as someone who's cooked 1,000, you've cooked 100,000, but as someone who's cooked 1,000 or 10,000 racks of ribs in my life, I'm not a baby back fan. Now, I like your ribs, don't get me wrong, but if I'm going to go buy ribs and cook them at home, I don't cook baby backs. It's just not my thing. So, and I think I'm probably in the majority as far as when you go to a barbecue restaurant in Oklahoma, you expect to get spare ribs, normally St. Louis spare ribs.
Right.
What was the draw to baby? Is that just what you did?
No, it comes from the manufacturing background.
Okay.
I all my jobs have always been in manufacturing. I mean, the few that I had in between Hasty Bake action were all kind of the same. And for me, a rack of spare ribs does not yield as many consistent pieces of product. So like a rack of baby back ribs, I will get about 10 good ribs out of it, and then excluding my end ribs.
Right.
Sometimes there's a magical pig that has like 14 ribs. I don't know why they kill that pig. They should have cloned it. But I find him sometimes. I'm like, holy crap, there was 14 bones. Like, where did this pig come
dinosaur
from?
pig.
Like, why did they kill him? He was so special. So, for me, it was about then I could be able to say, okay, if I made 20 racks of ribs, I know that I have 200 saleable bones.
Yeah.
On average out of those. With spares and St. Louis cut of spares, I didn't feel like I ever got close to that many. I felt like I maybe had 5 or 6 that were consistently like the same,
Right.
but no more than that. And so now I'm stuck with the question of, do I give a guy a couple of big ones and a couple of small ones? Do I give this guy all big ones and this guy all small ones? Like, how do I like allocate this random animal product, to people so they don't feel like they get screwed over?
Yeah.
And one of the biggest complaints whenever I'd sampled ribs out to people, was exactly that, was that, hey, there's, only 4 big ribs, and then there's these other ones, and there's these weird stringy ones, like there's not a whole lot of ribs here. And babies, I felt like, hey, I got 10, I know if I cook a rack of ribs, I got 10 good looking bones here that everybody would be happy to be able to get. Yeah. So that's the real reason, is like, because I feel like I can create those and manufacture those in a consistent way over and over again. I can make some really good spare ribs, and St. Louis style ribs. It's just when I get done, I'm like, I could have made.
Right.
I could have made.
Sure.
I don't know. Maybe I'm biased.
No, it's a consistency thing.
Maybe I'm a bias because I'm a tiny man. I'm like, the small ribs are better, but.
It's the Napoleon complex of cooking.
For me, yeah.
That's right.
I don't know what you're talking about.
So for me, it was about the consistency of the product. I buy choice briskets because if I feel like if I pay up for prime, sometimes I'm getting what I pay up for, and sometimes I'm not.
Sure.
And if I buy a select brisket or a no roll brisket, like. Sometimes, no matter how badass those end up cooking, it's not good from the get-go, right? Like, you can polish a turd all day long. It still tastes like a turd, right? So, and I'm not saying that you can't take a select or a no-roll brisket and make it taste good. I'm just saying if you start with a better initial product.
Yourself.
Yeah, if you start with a better initial product, it makes more sense. And again, there's a law of diminishing values, right? Or diminishing returns, where eventually, at $27 a pound, I don't feel like that brisket is that much better than the $15 a pound brisket. Right, so
for sure.
So that's a very long answer to a very short.
No, I think it's good, man. Because
No,
there's a couple things about BurnCo I think that stand out to people who've never had it. And the baby backs are. I mean, I don't know, and maybe I'm wrong. I don't know another place in Oklahoma or maybe even in Texas that routinely serves baby backs.
No, and the thing that, if I'm taking somebody to BurnCo, I would for the first time I would always say you need to at least try the ribs.
Yeah.
And I get people a lot of times that are like, I don't really do ribs, and I'm like, I get it, but you should have them.
Well, and to pigtail onto that, because that was going to be my second point, is
Well, it was my first point.
well,
So
I'm so far ahead of you.
I see.
That
I see.
No, when you were talking about how you hand out a rib because it sets the expectation, right? When people ask me that I'm taking to your place for the first time, like, hey, what's this like? I'm like, it's not like anything you've ever tried.
That's right.
Like, don't expect this to be like the barbecue you normally get. And that's not saying it's not barbecue in its own right. Like, if I were to describe it, you'll slap me for saying this probably, but I know you've heard it a million times. It's like a new school barbecue. An old school barbecue to me is like take a really shitty cut of old meat.
Yep.
Old school meat. You know what I mean? Like a select brisket or, crappy pork butt or whatever. Smoke it for a really long time, put a bunch of sauce on it, serve it on a tray. And there's some places who do that really, really well. You guys have reimagined macaroni and cheese and grilled potato salad and ribs and all this, where there's a calling, there's a throwback to what it kind of comes from, but it's a completely different style. It's that hot and fast. We want to highlight the grilling aspect of it. We want to highlight the flavor you get off the grill.
Yeah.
And if I have a St. Louis rib off of a Old Hickory or off of a Southern Pride or off of a traditional offset or whatever kind of, like, I know what I'm going to expect, right? I'm going to get a smoky old school rib. When I have a baby back that's been cooked over a 350 degree fire for a good chunk of its life on a Hasty Bake, like, it's a completely different flavor profile. And you do set the expectation right when you serve that to them on the get-go.
When I say, hey, this is what you get for free, imagine what the ones are like you pay for.
Right? This is the stuff I won't serve anymore.
I mean, I guess Chili's did do it first.
The baby backs?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but no.
They're so tiny, though. I mean,
Tony
really
Roma's
are.
did it too, didn't they?
Yeah,
I don't
Tony Roma's
know.
did.
They were
yeah.
baby
but
backs.
that was, and I think maybe the Lebanese steakhouses, maybe they were.
Yeah, they might. Yeah, might have been first.
They may have been a St. Louis rib though. I'm trying to remember.
I know Chili's was because
I was just trying to.
I mean,
get
they're-
real.
They're definitely not cheaper. Like people all the
Baby
time,
backs?
yeah.
No,
people
no,
all the time are
no.
like, you do that because they're cheaper. I'm like, no, like they are.
No, I'll tell you, I
not
cook spares
cheaper.
9 times out of 10 because they're more forgiving.
Yeah.
But I'm also not having to worry about consistency. I'm worried about, like, I want some fat in that product so I don't end up drying it out, because I don't dry out spare ribs.
Yeah.
But I know that if I screw up a baby back, I'm going to dry it out.
Yeah.
It's just, so I mean, you're taking a bigger risk, but you're also getting more consistency out of that risk.
Goes from tender to dry styrofoam, and not very long.
That's why your sauce is so good.
That's right. Thank you, Terry, at Carl's Chili.
Right?
And I get asked all the time, how do you do the BurnCo ribs?
It's the BurnCo ribs.
Yeah. Oh yeah. All the time.
And you know what? This is my favorite thing about that is the same screenshot. I don't think it was you. I think it was Nikki Corcoran.
It was, but it's
He gave the BurnCo style of, put hickory on it until your face burns.
Yeah.
And that screenshot has been screenshotted and shared and screenshot. Now, if you were to repost it, it is so pixelated because it's from like 8 years ago, and it's 9,000 screenshots of the original screenshot.
But what I love about that, and that's where I was going, was that same screenshot that everybody's seen, is people, so I'll tell people, I won't even go to the screenshot, but I'll tell people, you can cook, you can do these things in an hour and 45 and whatever, and you're gonna mess some up, right? But just keep doing it, and you're gonna get it if that's what you want to do. And they're like, well, you're leaving something out, and I'm like, I promise you, I'm not. Like, I promise you. I mean, I sat through your class, your all day long class, and they were like,
King of the Grill class.
yeah, and he was like, this is how you do it, like. This is it.
And then you did it.
And then
you did it, and then you ate it, and you're like, that's how you do it.
That's how you do it.
yeah.
But people, it doesn't matter when you're like, if you use, like 2 things, and well, I guess 3 if you want to include the rack of ribs, and that's all you got to do.
Wishbone Italian dressing.
Wishbone Italian dressing and barbecue rub. But I mean, the wishbone comes from Grant too. I mean, it's in the book.
Wishbone and Laurie's, like he would cook nothing if it didn't have one of those on it.
Yep.
Right.
It's the old school basic stuff. I mean, so you want to hear the rib story. So This is one we didn't actually talk about, but this is kind of cool
Yeah,
because now I get to go off script.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Do I have a minute?
Oh, yeah,
You
plenty
got
of time.
we got all
Okay.
the minutes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, awesome.
If people start dropping off, screw 'em.
Yeah.
So how did the BurnCo ribs come to be? So Adam Myers was a pretty good Hasty Bake cook and could make a lot of stuff. And Richard wanted me to cook for. We had what was the Memorial Day sale? I wouldn't call it Memorial Day sales. The sales rep thing. So all the sales reps came in
Right,
town.
right.
Okay.
And Richard would take them all out golfing. I didn't golf, so I wasn't invited to go golfing. And but I could dang sure cook the meal for them whenever they were done. So Richard's like, "Hey Myers, like, can you come over? And, I want you to cook this and this and this. And make some ribs. Okay." So I showed up at the golf club, like I'm by myself in the truck with all my gear, stuff. It wasn't a lot of guys, like a dozen guys, not a ton of people. A couple of Hasty Bakes, I got to drag them up like flights of stairs, these little things that got left out. So I'm behind, like way behind where I need to be.
Yeah.
And I'm like, there's no way for the recipe way I normally do these ribs that this is ever going to work. Like I got to do something else. Like,
We're gonna have to cut some corners.
like I'm totally panicking here, right? Like, okay, well, instead of like letting them ride at 225, 230 for the first couple hours, like maybe I just crank it up to like 300 and see what happens. And so I throw them right over the top of the fire, right? Like I'm like, if I can get this seasoning stuck to the outside of the ribs, like that's what I'm trying to do anyway. Like maybe they'll work out. And so I probably did like 6 racks of ribs in this fashion where I like seared the crap out of them. And then moved them off to the side and threw a bunch of hickory on, and then put all the rest of the stuff on that I was cooking for the deal. And the thing went off really great. And Rich came up to me afterwards. He's like, "Myers, would you do them ribs?" And I was like, "Oh no!" Like he hates them. Like he knows. Because he gave me some props on ribs, but like not a lot.
Right.
And he liked my beef tenderloin. Like beef tenderloin with the Dale's marinade on it was his jam for I don't even know how long.
It's still probably his jam. If we're being honest.
I think it was Maria's favorite at the time, and so I made a lot of that stuff. Anyway, he's like, "What'd you do with them ribs?" And I'm like, "Oh well, I was kind of in a hurry, and so I cooked them a little faster than I normally do." He's like, "Oh, you're freaking great, like you need to do that again." And I was like, okay. So literally the next week, he's like, "Can you do those ribs again?" And I was like, "Sure." And so I went out on the patio, and cooked the same. And Ellen was like, "Okay," in a hurry, like scared, and like did it. And I was like,
channeling
wow.
your former panic.
Yeah. But like trying to remember everything that I did, to kind of get it right. And it's like, okay, maybe this is a real thing. And I didn't think they were really that. I mean, we opened BurnCo. They weren't a thing that I was putting out there. I thought they were really good, but they were so different again than what everybody else was churning out, that I didn't think that it would really float. And so when the fact they got so much traction and that we sell as many of them as we do is really crazy. They're the most time consuming, the most expensive.
Yeah.
Take up the most space.
Yeah.
In a fairly limited space cooker.
That's right.
When you're talking about how you cook.
Right.
Yeah. I mean,
You don't have a big rotis that you can throw 400 racks on at a time.
So if you want to do the math on the 12, what is the old school gourmet? 1280 cubic inches of cook space?
Yeah, it might have been somewhere there.
12 or 1,300 times 17, you end up with a pretty large volume of stuff. I think when I broke down like how much, like if I was a big barrel smoker, I think it was like a pretty ridiculous smoker that for the amount of space.
How many
that I
racks
have.
can you get on the gourmets you cook on?
So I can't really get much more than about 20 racks per grill.
That seems like a crazy number to anyone who does not.
Yeah.
Because we'll get people like, "Hey, you think if I get a rib rack that I could get like 6 or 7 racks?"
No, I'm not recommending that, right? Like our rib,
I placed an entire business model on this. No, I'm not going to recommend.
Right.
our rib station in Jenks is 6 dedicated stainless steel gourmets, and they on most days full tilt about 5 cases. So that's less than a case per HB, and each case is 18 racks. So
And you're leaning on walls and on top of each other, and I mean, there's something with the movement of it.
There's a couple different ways. I don't tend to I don't rule with an iron fist on my pit masters. My goal is that I want them to make the food to end up the way that I make it. How they get there, I really don't care.
Yeah.
As long as they get to the same place that I get to. You know, if you want a hickory bomb right after you sear your ribs, you dang sure can, but you will be crying the whole entire time.
Right.
Me, I wait till I get most of my cycles on before I hickory bomb because I don't want to cry the whole entire time.
Right.
So, so, you know, on average, we're doing, you know, between 60 and 100 racks a day, but we can really, you know, push it out and do a lot more if you really have to. Eventually, you get to a point where you're putting ribs on and you're taking ribs off of the exact same grill, and that's where you're like it starts to become an Inception type of deal.
Right.
And then what's really crazy is when you finish that and then you fire them back up and then do it again.
Yeah.
Which is a different model from we're going to sell out in an hour and a half to all of a sudden now when you have Boston and you move into that brick and mortar and you have a luncheon, potentially dinner service, especially with Jenks where you got a dinner service, you're flipping a lot.
Yeah.
It was a lot. There were a lot of animals that died for me every day. That was kind of one of the things I used to like to talk about. Like, you want to talk about how many animals died for me today?
Yeah.
It's a point of pride to that. We always like to say Aaron Franklin kills 60 cows a day.
That's
yeah,
right.
well, it's why I don't hunt. You know, like enough domestic animals.
I kill 60 pigs a day. I'm good.
It's tough. So, but no, my thing with I don't know where you want to go topic-wise.
I'll tell you, but I want you to keep talking.
Yeah.
Okay, well, people always want to know why I chose the Hasty Bake and why I do the Hasty Bake. And, you know, I spent over a decade being a sales rep. And Hasty Bake is really unique because it's a manufacturer. Like, we manufacture the Hasty Bakes right here. But then they also have this awesome retail store where they retail other great products, right, from all over the country. Because if a person really likes to cook, then there's a bunch of different products that they need to have, right? Yeah. Could you be like me and say, I can do everything on a Hasty Bake? Sure, right? But there are other products that may do something a little bit easier or a little bit better.
Sure.
And so there's all the more reason to have different products. But what I couldn't find anywhere else was the versatility of a Hasty Bake. Yeah. I couldn't find another unit that I could instantly pull a brisket off of, right, and then raise the fire all the way up and add a handful of hickory and then cook a steak on the exact same thing, right? And so, like, people say, why do you use Hasty Bakes in your store? And it's because I have 17 different units that can do anything that I want them to do in any configuration that I want them to do. And in a traditional setup where you have 1 or 2 or 3 or maybe even 5 pits, you can be running a few different things, or you're cooler on one end and hotter on the other end, or you got a few different variations, but not like you can really on a Hasty Bake. And the fact that they're so portable. I mean, when we had the big flood in 2017 out there in Jenks, and the river was 12 inches from coming into my store, we moved out of there like gypsies in the night. In 4.5 hours, I packed up every piece of electronics and everything that could be hurt by water and moved it all out. And when we left, all my people were like, but what about the Hasty Bakes? And I was like, bro, they're 304 grade stainless steel. Like,
and they weigh 200 pounds
if
each.
anything is going to be left after the store floods, it's going to be these Hasty Bakes.
Right.
So, I've always liked the portability. It's easy for us to mop around and clean around and move them. And the versatility, I challenge the world. Bring me a better one. Bring me a better one, world.
Yeah.
Well, and at the end of the day, all of us are, fortunate enough to really be able to cook on anything we want to cook on.
Yeah. I mean,
it's and I'm saying that like there's times in my life where I have not been, but there's very few cookers out there, short of some of these things that you see on Instagram that will sit there and
yeah.
But realistically, if there's a backyard cooker, if there's a normal consumer cooker that I could cook on, I'll buy it.
Right.
And I have.
Yeah.
Like I think I have 28 grills in my shop right now.
Yeah.
Now of those 28 grills, about 12 of them are Hasty Bakes. But from the minute I started cooking on a Hasty Bake, most of my other grills stayed in the shop.
Yeah.
And it's not because I don't find a use for them. It's just I found something that's easier, produces a better product. I'm more proud of the product that comes off of it. And there's times where, and we've talked about this in the past, like I want to sit there on a Sunday and feed an offset every 45 minutes to sit in a long chair and drink cold beer all day.
Sure.
That's great, man. Like that, there's 100% a place that I actually felt like that this last weekend, and then I slept like crap the night before, and finally fell asleep at like 6 o'clock in the morning. Woke up at 9. I was going to do a brisket, and I was like, well, you know what? I'm not doing it on is that offset today. So the gourmet got fired up, and it was an outstanding brisket, right? So, but we could cook on anything we want to cook on. But when you find that thing that you're like, this is foolproof.
Yeah.
I may want to play around.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I would love to go drive a McLaren F1 tonight, but you know what? I'm not going to make my daily driver a McLaren F1. You just find
Especially not if you have any friends, right? Like,
Sure,
where are you going to put them at?
Right,
you know,
right.
one friend can party with you at a time.
Right.
You know, like
right. So it's a different ballgame, man. When you find that thing that like you said, and especially in a restaurant environment, you're like, I need consistency.
Yeah.
And consistency, you know, for some guys, and great for some guys, that's 1 or 2 old hickories. That works for them.
Yeah.
When you get the product you want out of Hasty Bakes, then it may need to be 6 or 10 or 12 Hasty Bakes. But you get that consistency, you know how to work it, and then that's what you copy and paste, right? And that's what you teach pit masters as you hire them on. Is this is what we're shooting for? I love that you said like, however you get to this end product, this is what we're selling.
Right.
Don't change my end product, but however you get there, like that's how you teach a pit master, right?
it has to be there in the right amount of time too.
Right.
You know, that's the
Right.
people
Like
don't-
there's parameters.
You know, we live under a crushing deadline. You know, we make every single thing fresh every day, and so.
Yeah, you don't run your fires at 1, 2.
No,
o'clock in the morning, then, like-
so early guys are in the store working by 5 a.m. So
That's unheard of in a barbecue restaurant.
As long as
To
all
turn
of
it out
my
the same day. Like
as long as
that,
all
yeah.
of my stuff goes well from the time I leave the house, you know, sometimes those Riverside lights at the front of the casino, I will sit there I'm like, who is this light for right now? But I don't really want to give the light horse a reason to come talk
So
to me
you're right
in
there by
morning,
the
so-
TPD.
Yeah, so and right there too,
Yeah,
right?
so
So
you got light horse fleece, and then you have TPD.
4 minutes later, you're like, really?
Yeah.
Really seriously?
So all, you know, as long as everything goes good, it's not an issue to be able to be there a little bit before 5. But we make everything fresh every day. So there's usually 2 guys in the morning that get everything started. One guy will make the fires, and the other guy will get all the meat out and start slamming and powdering meat. And then we make fires and start cooking. We have to have meat on by 5:45. No later than 6 o'clock.
And we're talking
with
ribs, we're talking brisket, we're talking
Well,
butts.
by that time, we've got to have brisket and pork on, big meat. When we talk
Right.
about big meat at BurnCo, we're talking about briskets and porks because those are the things that have the longest cook time. And we have a pretty elaborate trim process. Maybe if we do another one of these or do another thing, I can talk more about like my actual kind of process for that stuff.
Yeah.
But you know, and trying to get it consistent. But anyway, so we start. At 5 o'clock in the morning, get all the big meat on. Usually by 6 a.m., all of your big meat is on. Put on your bolognas and your fatties, and then we start cutting coleslaw. Like we literally take heads of cabbage and with a knife, slice them up into coleslaw, and then our dressing we make from scratch. Not every day. Sometimes we make 2 or 3 days of dressing in advance. It doesn't get better by making dressing fresh. So. It is one of those things that can hang out for a day.
Do you make your fatties fresh every morning, or do you start prepping them ahead of time?
Fatties can be made a day or 2 ahead of time. They actually cook better if they have a little bit
together,
of time in the cooler. They'll try not to oblong themselves quite as much. So depends on who rolled them and.
Who rolled the fatty? I like
Yeah,
that.
who rolled the fatty? Hey, we roll and smoke fatties daily. That
right.
used to be illegal back, by the way. So
That's right. Not anymore.
Not anymore. Not here in Oklahoma. So we get everything started. The guy that does big meat usually will peel off and do the beans. The guy that's going to do the ribs will make the coleslaw and then get started on the ribs in the morning. Usually ribs in the morning. They're firing up grills by 6:30, 6:45 with runs of ribs going on at 7 a.m. My big meat, my brisket and pork, I'm never going to get done in less than 4 hours. Like
That's still mind-blowing.
No way I'm getting it done in less than 4 hours.
Is it lost on you how mind-blowing that is to people?
Yeah.
Well, the thing is that, again, I did not come from like a restaurant barbecue world.
Like it has to be 12 hours or it's not good.
I didn't come from that. It was Tim from Three Guys Smoking, I think, who walked up to me, and we were at a cooking demo somewhere, and I asked him if my brisket looked good. And he said, yeah, it looks great. And I said, does it look like it's done? And he said, I don't know. And I said, well, does it look done to you? And he said, well, brisket doesn't look done. Brisket is done. And I was like, well, what do you mean?
You can put that on a shirt.
And he's like, well, what internal temperature is it? And I was like, I don't know. And he was like, so you're cooking briskets by what they look like? And I was
into
like,
it with a butter knife.
I was like, yes. He's like, oh God. He's like, look here, let me give you some advice. Like, you got to cook briskets by internal temp. And this is, you know, my early days at Hasty
You got to
Bake.
start somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, look, no brisket is ever going to be edible below 195 degrees internal temp. He's like, closer to 200 is my preference. He's like, but food is everybody's thing. He's like, closer to 195, you're going to get more pull to it. He's like, the closer you are to 200, over 200, it's going to begin to fall apart. So I was like, ding, there was my first like magical chunk
milestone
of knowledge.
Right. Yeah.
Like, hey, smart guy, food isn't done when it looks done.
Right.
Food's done when it is done, right? And so I started going back through all these cookbooks and being like, oh my gosh, they're giving me all these internal temperatures, and I'm just like skipping over them, right? Like thinking they're like, you know, like, oh, make sure you use a 3/4 of a tablespoon. Like nobody does that, right? Like grabs a whole one, knock a little off, like throw it in there, you know? So that was totally like one of those things. And I the very next cook I did by internal temp, and I was like, dude, he's so right. I think next time I saw him, I like hugged him. I was like, you changed my life forever. Like I made edible.
So was there a big difference between what you were making before?
Oh, it was terrible. I made briskets that looked wonderful, but they were bad. I mean, like I was going. Oh yeah. I was going to cooking demos, you know, and throwing it. You know, and I'm like, oh, it cooked for 6 or 7 hours. You know, how to be delicious. You know, it looks great. You know, I didn't wrap it, I didn't temp it, I did nothing. It's all crusty. You know, and I'm carving through this thing and like
medium rare, perfect.
Handle somebody, you know, and this guy's like gnawing on it, you know, like waiting for me to turn around so I can throw it on the ground, you know. But that was one of the things, and you know, that started a whole like growth in understanding how food cooks by internal temperature. I mean, every single thing that we cook at BurnCo,
In case the health department's listening.
With the exception of the ribs, is all done by internal temperature. So,
and
chicken's internal temp, brisket's internal temp, pork's internal temp, mac's internal temp, fatty's internal temp, bolo's internal temp, sausage internal temp.
Well, and truthfully, here's the thing with internal temp too, is I think a lot of people think of internal temp from a health perspective, which there's 100% a place for it.
For sure.
But when you're talking about cooking to temperatures 50, 60, 70 degrees past health, you're not worried about the health. At that point, it's more about the resistance of the probe going into the meat than it is the actual number that's on the readout.
Yeah.
Well, I will lay some very, very atomy knowledge on you people. If they pour me some more rotten brown corn water in here, there might even be some more that spews from here. But
look at that. There's a bottle of it.
So something that I paid attention to.
You want to drink your water first, or you just want to water?
No,
it
I want to. It's
smart, man.
It's well worn water. Perfect, sir. So this internal temp thing, I started really, really thinking about this, and I got pretty good at like, you know, mapping out internal temps to be able to make stuff, you know, be juicy and tender and cooked all the way through and good and delicious. And then I went to Eagle's Nest, New Mexico, which is like 8,300 feet of elevation. And I was, you know, still the super ninja stud that I am with my Hasty Bake up there and this beautiful environment.
With limited oxygen supply.
With limited oxygen supply. So I knew that would be a thing. I knew that I had less oxygen, so I'd have to burn hotter fires to be able to get the same amount of BTUs and the same heat exchange from meat to fire. So I was prepared for that. But what I didn't think about was that when I was trying to cook my brisket, it would not get past 198 degrees. And it was so frustrating. My ribs came out fine. Everything was fine. But my brisket just Hold up,
temp
baby.
Does water boil at that elevation?
Boom!
Yeah, there it is.
Water temperature, water boils at 197 degrees up there. And so I began to then kind of look at, okay, you know, is this even possible up here? And the thing is that the water boils out before the collagen melts at that high of an elevation. And that collagen melts at over 200 degrees. I estimate around 205, 206, the collagen begins to melt. And that's what makes meat tender again.
Right.
You know, the people think, oh, the fat fat breaks down, and that's what makes it soft, and that's not true. It's the collagen. It's this stretchy, weird stuff that's in your face and all over your flesh. And meat is
It's the stuff the crunchy moms are putting in their coffee.
That's right.
I don't know. There you go. So, but that's the secret is the melting of the collagen, and that's why in ribs we can't use a meat thermometer because there's too much variation.
Right.
Especially with baby backs, you got so much collagen in baby backs.
You've got to pick them up, and once that collagen melts, they go from being rubbery, right, where you couldn't shake the thing in half to trying to snap in half, and that's when that collagen lets go. And so, for those of you at super high elevation, know that it may be impossible for you to be able to get hot enough to really release your collagen and get the meat to the right amount of doneness.
The trick I've learned with high elevation, because I've done some cooks in Denver and other places before, I have to cook everything 25 to 35 degrees hotter than I normally do. Yeah. And I adjust my time to make that adjustment. But briskets are the same. Like I'll smoke them 275, 290. And then when they start hitting that point, I got to ramp it to 325, 350, just to push it through that last little bit. But you really run the risk of ruining your finished product at that point.
My brisket was dried out and underdone, right, at elevation. But it's all about the collagen, right? It's all about the collagen.
You can make good chop brisket.
And wherever it was not up to my.
Not even choppable.
Not up to my. I'm just saying, if you've ever been up that high before, it literally. If you're going to cook an elevation, Google it, see what the boiling point of water is. Know that your meat will not get above the boiling point of water for your elevation because it physically cannot and still have water inside it.
Yeah. Right.
So luckily here in Oklahoma at 740-ish feet,
are we that high?
Our boiling point of water is 210-ish. So
smarter than me.
So 208.4 is our
Been
magical
higher.
number. 208.4.
Which may explain why I have had issues cooking Wagyu pork or Wagyu beef in Tulsa versus like in other areas of the country.
Yeah.
Because Wagyu likes to break down in that 210 to 215 standpoint. And you have a hard time getting there. Absolutely do. You do have a stalling point.
Where you start to, well, that's something else people ask me about all the time too. What about the stall? And I'm like, people argue and fight about what that is. And what I believe that is once the meat has got hot enough that it begins to really put off a lot of condensation, a lot of steam, that phase change from liquid to vapor takes up a lot of energy.
Yeah.
And that actually is cooling off the brisket, right? When it's going, or
it's
the
like
pork,
it's like
right?
when you run a mile and then you stop and that breeze makes you cold even though you're hot.
Yeah. It's exactly what that is. And people ask me, what do you do to work through it? Typically, that's about at our wrap point.
Yeah.
Our wrap point is about 160 degrees.
But you're not even really paying attention to that at that point.
No. We typically won't probe for wrap.
Right.
Wrap is more of a textural
Color
thing. I want it to look like I want it to look, and whenever I pick the brisket up, if it folds like a limp tortilla around my tongs, it definitely needs to cook for longer. If I pick it up and if it's stiff as a board, then I know, hey, that dude is well on his way to being done, because all meat goes through the soft and floppy, stiff as a board, and then soft and floppy again.
Right.
And that's that. Well, all barbecue meat. Steaks are the exception because they never get the stiff as a board.
Right. Absolutely. Hey, I want to talk to you about, so you guys moved into Boston, right? And then
As in 2014.
As in 2014. And then at some point you got a wild hair and you're like, hey, there's some people in South Tulsa. How did Jinx come about?
Jinx America.
Jinx America.
So, Saturdays at 18th and Boston were crazy. Regular weekdays were busy, but Saturdays were nuts. And all of my regulars, no offense, Jinx people, I love all of you. They have a word for you. They call you Southies.
There's an iron curtain.
They
really don't like
said,
the cross.
right.
Midtown folks said all these Southies are coming here on Saturday and making it really crazy for me to try to get in and get my barbecue, right? And so I'm like, okay, there's an excess of demand, especially on Saturday, from another part of the market. Like, where is this? Are you going to pee? Will you pee for me too?
I'll take care of you.
All right, thank you.
You can go next.
So I began to ask a lot of these folks, especially on Saturdays, who weren't regulars where you come from. And there was a lot of folks out south. And they said, because I can't get down here during the week on my lunch break, it's too far.
It's far
It's too far. I mean, Tulsa's a weird town, right? Like, technically you can be anywhere in 20 minutes, but we don't like to drive in traffic for more than about 10 or 12. Right. So they said that, they couldn't get over during the week, and so it had to be on the weekends. And so that made Saturday really busy. So I began to think maybe there's a whole nother market that I'm just not appealing to, because when we were on 11th Street, all the folks were officing downtown. They were all business professionals to office downtown. They all lunched from the downtown area and then spread out through Midtown Tulsa to be able to eat. So I had never really looked anywhere else, and now there's this whole other market that is knocking on the door. And so the Creek Nation, One Fire actually owns that Riverwalk property,
right?
And they came at us and said, "Hey, look, we have this big property that we just bought that we're reinvesting in. Are you interested?" And I blew them off for, I don't know, a very long time, probably a year or 2 years. And they kept coming back. And
as any restaurant owner would, when you've already got, literally you're trying to put up fires in your own spot. And you're like, of course you want me to expand.
I don't really, I don't have a reason to do this, but this South market was in fact very, very strong, right? And these folks really, really wanted the food, and at that time there wasn't the G's at Tulsa Hills. Right. There really wasn't any barbecue out that way. So I began to take it a little bit more seriously. And we went out there, and the coolest thing was that there was tons of parking. And if you're trying to turn a couple hundred people in 120 minutes, then you need a lot of parking spaces. Yep. So I need a lot of parking. And so that facility had a lot of parking. It was a newer construction, had a really cool view, and they really wanted me in there. And so they made it very easy for me to be able to go in and build another store, and for me to be able to satisfy a whole other chunk of Tulsa. And it was great, because when I opened that store, I didn't steal from my downtown business, from my Midtown business.
Right. You just built up a different clientele.
All I did was make it easier for Southtown people to be able to get my food, and for my regular Midtown, downtown folks to have an easier Saturday, right, where there was less pressure on Saturday. So I literally just satisfied two parts of a market in the same geographical area. So, and that was in 2017. That store, I got to lay out a little bit better. It had been closed down for, I think, 4 or 5 years before I went in there. So there was a good bit of existing infrastructure, but not what I needed. I'm a weirdo, because I need like half kitchen, half restaurant. Yeah. And most restaurants are like a third kitchen, 2/3 restaurant, because they
but your seating's moving so quick.
Well, but I need a ton of space for what I'm cooking.
Kitchen, right.
I mean, but my guys are working with fire and knives and big, huge chunks of meat, not a pre-portioned thing in a bag that you pulled out of the freezer and dropped in the magic box you hit number 7 for. So
biting my tongue on places like
I was gonna say, like, we can list all of them.
Everybody's kind of their own thing. So so Jinx store in 2017. I did lunch and dinner out there.
Yeah. Which makes sense in Jinx. I mean,
people
are living there and not living in downtown.
Jinx. It kind of lived and died by sports, though. I mean, Jinx is one of those towns, man. If there's an out-of-town football game on Friday night, right, like you're dead, bro. Yeah. You are dead in the water. Now, if it's a home game Friday night, it's going to be busier than heck, right? Like all the call-in orders, everybody's there early, so it was really kind of difficult. And then coronavirus, we stopped doing dinner over there, just because I was just cooking food and putting it in a hot box and then giving it away to every bar, police station, firehouse, local business, anybody else who would take it for a while. And then we stopped doing dinner, and I never brought it back after COVID.
So is it still, you're not doing dinner?
I'm still not doing dinner. No, I'm still lunch only. I brought both stores in line, ran the same hours at both stores, and then when I lost the store back in February, everyone's like, "Oh, you can do dinner out there." And I asked my wife, "What do you think I should do?"
It's always a smart move.
That's right.
And she said, "Were dinners always awesome out there before COVID?" And I said, "No, if football, sports were going on, like it wasn't." And she said, "I would rather have you at home."
Yeah.
And so So that's kind of what made that pull for me.
Good
There's
for
no
you.
shame in that.
But it also, you know, after I lost 18th in Boston, you know, I had no store to be able to do events in. You know, the 18th in Boston was kind of my event store. It was the you know, the cooler looking store with more character. Everyone always wanted to do all their parties over there. And now people want to do parties with me still, but I've only got one store. And if I did dinner, I have to choose: do I do a dinner service and
So now
and
you have a
make some
venue
money?
that's available.
There you go, in the evening. So
From an entertainment standpoint, now 18th Boston, definitely there's a cool factor there.
Right.
But from an entertainment standpoint, as far as being able to host people, Jenks works great, man.
Yeah.
well, I got to lay that.
Get the little room. I mean, it's a good layout.
I got to lay that store out a lot better, you know, because Boston was you know, an existing, you know, been there for almost 100 years. Had been all kinds of really great stuff, you know, killer live music venues and bars and restaurants. You know, so many people grew up going to shows and eating food there. I mean, it just had a total feel to it that unfortunately you can't quite get in the strip center. And I tried really hard. I put a lot of rusty metal in there, and
out front.
And I've that's right, out front. I've tried to make it as authentic as I really can, but
different ballgame. You talked about 18th in Boston and losing that store a little bit, and I know one of the biggest questions we received, you know, as we've been pumping this episode for the last month is like, hey, what do you guys want to ask Adam? And I know you're going to grimace here because you've got this question 1,000 times, but here's my hope. If we can do a public service to you, and when people ask you this question, you're like, you know, I was on this podcast.
Yeah, and
and you should go look at hour 145. And you'll hear the whole thing.
has it really been that long? Oh my gosh.
Hey, this is why we're here, buddy.
I apologize.
No,
don't
not you.
apologize.
This
We're
is
having
why
a
we're here,
blast.
and this is why we actually have more people watching right now than we did when we started.
Oh, nice.
So there you
nice.
go.
So they don't hate this.
I want to ask you two things. All right, and maybe, I don't know, this is not going to seal the deal.
I would say 1.5 things.
1.5 things. Was the fire, so anyone who has not been in the Tulsa area, if you're in the Tulsa area, you're well aware of this, but even not in the Tulsa area, there's a fire. When did this happen? 2021?
This happened last February 16th.
That's right, February. I mean,
in 2022.
Yeah.
Sidebar. Do you realize we probably got 40 to 50 phone calls in the first day or two after that happened? What happened?
Yeah.
Do you know what's going to happen? As if we have any idea, you know, whatsoever.
So do we want the answers to those questions?
No. I'm leading up to these answers.
Right,
you know.
good.
So here's the funny thing is, like, you know, the last thing I was going to do that week was text you or call you and be like, hey,
hey man.
like, I think he's a little busy. We'll figure this thing out later. But let's do the public service here.
It's later.
What here? You're clearly, as I look at you on camera right now, you look like a fire inspector.
Yeah.
You look like someone who makes their entire living diagnosing what happened during a fire. So take your fire inspector hat off.
Yeah.
I don't want you to have to do that right now. Was the fire cooking related?
No.
There you go.
Because you're not there cooking at, 2 or 3 in the morning?
So, points of fact, we do lunch. We did not have an event going that evening. My people were gone by about 4:30 or 5 o'clock that night. So all cooking was finished up by about 1:30 or so.
In the afternoon.
In the afternoon, yes, that's
so
correct.
we're clear.
And I play in a rock band. It's one of those weird things that I still like smashing stuff, but it's a different kind of stuff. Than,
It doesn't break when you hit it?
Me. Right. Yeah. It's kind of cool. So anyway, I play in a rock band. I was playing a show out in Broken Arrow and got a call from a friend of mine in the fire department that said, hey, what are you doing? And I said, I just got done playing a show. Like, I'm in Broken Arrow. What are you doing? And he said, I'm listening to the fire radio right now, and I'm putting on my boots because they just rolled some trucks to 18th and Boston. And I laughed, and I asked him how much he had been drinking this evening, and he said he hadn't been at all, that he was dead serious and putting on his boots and heading to 18th and Boston, and suggested that I do the same thing. So I had the longest drive from Broken Arrow to 18th and Boston ever. The dude that was with me, I didn't say anything for a while, and then he's like, are you okay? And I was like, no, I am far from freaking okay. It was like the scene from Pulp Fiction when he was like, I was like, we okay? I'm far from okay, right? Like, it's just like that. Like, I'm far from okay. You know, I said, but I said, I just got a call that there's a fire at 18th in Boston. I said, do you think that I can speed? Because I'm driving down the BA, like, if you're speeding to a fire. And he said, yeah, I think you could. I said, but if I get pulled over, do you think I still have to stop? And he said, yeah, I think you do. I said, so I think the right thing to do is maybe 6 over. And he said, I think that's probably about right. So
it's a good rule of life, right?
So it was like the longest drive of my life. So got there and store burned down and all kinds of insurance and fire investigator people looked at it and they all said, hey, it's a really old building. There's a fire between the roof and the ceiling. They couldn't pinpoint it down exactly to where it was, but it wasn't related to me and what I do there. So Hasty Bakes did not start the fire.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
It was Ryan. Ryan started the fire.
That's Ryan
started the fire.
I think there's a whole song that really foretold what was going on.
Right.
Sorry, I was working around just to the Ryan started a fire part. That's all I wanted to do.
So I'll tell you
it turned out it was a pizza in a toaster oven the whole time.
So I'll tell you on the backside of this because I don't believe I've told you this. The day before the fire, one of your employees came in here, as they do every week or two, and purchased a case of fire gel.
We lost that case of fire gel.
I'm sure you did. And the next morning, everyone showed up to work and we're like, you don't think we're like, you stop talking right now.
So
the biggest small town ever. So totally true.
And I think right behind that question, so that's I would call that 1A, and then 1B is, are you coming back? You know, what is that gonna look like? Is that in your future?
I was at 18th in Boston for 9 years. I love that store. I didn't leave.
Right.
My store caught on fire and burned down.
Right.
I don't own the building.
Right.
There is not an agreement for me to be able to go back there right now. So,
and they are rebuilding that facility.
Right.
Yeah, I think they're going to do something over there. Yeah. I don't know what they have going on, but it will not be me again. Trust me, I really want to be there. I worked really, really hard to get the downtown, midtown crowd. I mean, I live in Midtown. My kids go to school in Midtown. I'm a Midtown guy. Nothing wrong to Jinx or the south side of town, but I worked really hard for my Midtown. So Midtownies, please don't give up on me. Like I'm 7 extra minutes away, right? Like please make the extra drive.
It's basically Texas.
I know. No, I joked around. It's North Texas, like all the time. Like my new stores and my stores in North Texas. So, but I mean, everything's the same. I would love to come back. That was a unicorn spot. Like I said, when my very first business plan, the whole thing was in that building, right? And for that thing to come up available for me to get it, and then I was there for 9 years, you know. So
stumble out of the store, go play the Merc. I mean, it was a big deal.
I mean, you had Merc, had Shrine. I mean, when Brian was right next door at Double Shot. I mean, it was like the trifecta. Everyone was at Double Shot in the morning, and they were seeing us for lunch, and then by the time they finished lunch, they were bleeding over into the Merc or head over to the Shrine. I mean, we
never figured out what they did for work, by the way. That was just those people. They spent the entire day eating barbecue, drinking coffee, and drinking beer.
It's good work if you can get it.
I think they're social media influencers, maybe. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know what people do that they get to live that lifestyle. Anyway, so that's kind of where things are. I don't have any plans to open another store. If you own a really awesome property for a really good deal, please let me know.
So, I mean, you don't not have any plans to open it?
Well, I have Robbie used to have a thing. I never miss an opportunity to say no.
There you go.
So I'll hear out every opportunity there is out there. You know, took a long time to get to where I am now.
Yeah.
Sure.
Do you feel, now I don't want to get deeply philosophical.
Deep thoughts.
Deep thoughts. We'll have a whole segment here eventually. Do you feel more centered with one store where you pulled in multiple directions when you had 2 stores?
Yep.
Yeah.
It's just like cats, right? You have one cat, you're like, oh, this cat is pretty awesome. But at night, it likes to run around and like jump on stuff and make a lot of noise. Maybe if I get another cat, then this cat won't do that so much. And it'll be even easier. I got one litter box for 2 cats. I got one set of food bowls for 2 cats.
I feel like that with kids.
Like
Yeah.
it'll be
true.
easier. And it's not really easier, you know. And you know, I could do 2 stores again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I want to, because I'm the guy that did it in the first place, I guess.
Right.
So,
Do you feel like, and you can just throw something at me if we need to move on. So
this is what people paid for this.
That's
They're
true. I mean,
paying us
this
for
is
this.
the hot
right?
take
Like
right
they're-
now.
That's right.
do you feel like your quality of life has changed with going back to one store?
I don't know. Things are way different since coronavirus. Like that right there, like reset the whole entire thing for me. You know, I always kind of arrogantly said, I'll always have a job as long as people need to eat lunch.
Right.
And coronavirus was like, yeah,
Cold cuts are a thing.
Yeah.
yeah, as long as they can come
Yeah,
in
right.
and get out
Right.
and you can get food and like there's a million other
Yeah.
things that have
Yeah.
to happen to make it work. So
Right.
like I'm just really, really grateful.
Yeah.
Sure.
You know, I look at, you know, when I started with Robbie, we always joked around that we planned to fail. You know, I went to business school and he worked in lots of different restaurants and you just know the statistics and you expect to fail. And I have a phrase that I use. It's the 5 Fs. Maybe somebody else already uses it, but it's the fear of failure forces me to effing flourish. That is
Yeah.
5 Fs.
Right.
And that's the thing that when my alarm goes off at 4:04 in the morning, that's why I get up,
Yeah.
right? It's because the fear of failure. That's why I make sure I get my stuff done, make sure that I order the food that I got to order and fix the broken stuff is the
Right.
fear of failure. So coronavirus kind of put everything in perspective. You know, life was really difficult through that.
Yeah.
We did a lot of call-in stuff and just tried to
A
survive.
lot of shucking and jiving, man.
I mean, government helped me through student loans. Government helped me through this. Say what you want to about government. Usually not a huge fan, right? But
Yeah.
Right.
2 times in my life when I really, really, really needed it to come through for me, it totally did. So that's my 2 cents on it.
Yeah, no, I think it's good, man. You know, I'm fortunate enough to be pretty good friends with a lot of different restaurant owners in town, around the country, but especially here in Tulsa. And I know a lot of times people kind of look at restaurant owners kind of like, you know, lack of a better term, a piece of meat.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, what can you do for me?
That's
And I
right.
really don't care like what it does to your family life or your mental health or
Right.
anything else. Like it's, you know, are you open or are you not? And if you're not, you know, why are you inconveniencing me?
Right.
And it's things like COVID, it's things like the fire, it's things like that that always make me think like, man, it's an important question to bring up to these guys and be like, what's allowing you to do this and keeping you sane? Because I know that the draw is like, man, you could work 24 hours a day,
Yeah.
you know, and people would come and they'd buy your stuff and you'd make a living. But like, at what point do you like find that balance where you
Yeah.
keep yourself sane? And I know that, you know, when Boston went down and you guys were doing Jinx, the one thing that we kind of internally talked about, I'm like, man, I bet as painful as that is, like there's a little bit of a centering after the disaster that COVID is and everything. It's like, that's one less thing off the palette that I have to think
Right.
about right now. And among all the crap and insurance and business and everything like that, I was thankful, at least in your shoes, where you're like, he at least gets to focus on the one thing. And I found like in my interactions with you, like you probably had a little bit of weight off your shoulders. And I'm sure it broke your heart a little bit too.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
But man, it's crazy because I know the blood, sweat, and tears that go into those kind of things.
Yeah.
Well, the thing about coronavirus was that it prepared me to lose everything.
Yeah.
Right. And I was prepared to lose everything in the very beginning. Like when you first start, like I know what chance
Yeah.
I make it a year, right? Like
Right.
like
Good
like
luck.
1 in 10, right?
Right.
Like the chance I make it 2 years, like 1
But
in
you're
20.
like 9 years
like
in.
the
Yeah.
chance I make it 5 years, like 1 in 50, right? Like you gotta
Right.
really
Yeah.
really hook it. And like coronavirus, you know, and nobody knew what was going on. Nobody knew what was
Oh,
going
yeah,
to
it was the
happen.
Wild
Like
West.
it was terrible. And so I was just ready to lose everything.
Yeah.
You know, like again, like ready to lose both stores and tell everybody like, hey, like
Was a good time.
don't
but-
know where we're all gonna go work, but
Right.
you know, we got to go find something to do.
Yeah.
And then to like kind of see around the corner, like, okay, like 2022, like this is my year. Like having 2 stores isn't a gigantic 2 anchors around my neck
Right.
instead
Right.
of just 1. Like this is my year to flourish again.
Yeah.
And then half of everything I own and half of my ability to make money is vaporized. So I moved all my people from the Boston store, brought them all over to the Jinx store. I told them all I would just try to figure out how to make it work. I asked everybody to please be considerate and know that if the situation was turned the other way and the Jinx store burned down, that I'd be asking the Boston guys to take you into,
Yeah.
you know, we're all the
Right.
same family. And, you know, I say guys, folks,
Yeah.
I have
Yeah.
daughters. I'm not trying to
Right.
be that way. So a lot of the folks, you know, understood that you know there's not a large corporation there taking care of everyone.
Right.
I'm literally just a regular dude trying to float it. So they stuck with me, and it worked out. So to answer your question, do I feel better? Do I feel more in control?
And I know that's grossly oversimplified.
Do I feel like, you know, I mean, I don't know. If you have 2 kids and one dies, is your life easier?
It's a great question.
You know,
Yeah.
like,
It's a good
I don't
point.
know. I mean, technically, yes,
Yeah.
but like, you still have this other kid that
Right.
you used to have.
I'd
That
still
you,
rather have both kids.
there
Yeah.
you go.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
so you know, how do I not know that I wouldn't be flourishing with 2 stores right now,
Right.
right? Like, so, can I ask you guys for like 30 seconds where I take a leak?
Please do.
Is that inappropriate to do in a
Nope, you do it.
podcast?
Nope, we'll do a commercial here.
Yeah.
Ready for the commercial timeline?
Here
You
we
know where
go.
the bathroom is in this place? Have you been here before?
Yeah.
Hey, we're going to take a quick break and we're going to talk about the Roughneck.
Yeah.
You wanna talk about the Roughneck?
Yeah, let's talk about it.
Hey, for anyone who's still here joining, which is a good chunk of people, because I
Yeah.
can see how many people are watching.
Yeah.
The Hasty Bake Roughneck is now available online, and here's the good news: is I would say we're not pre-selling them anymore.
We're not.
We're
No,
officially
we're
shipping
not.
them. So if you order a Roughneck now,
Yeah.
you're not going to be waiting 6 weeks. You're not going to
No.
be waiting 8 weeks. You might be waiting a couple weeks.
Yeah, no, I thought you were gonna say
not
like they could have them next week, and I was like, let's
No,
let's
because
not-
Zach
let's
will
not
be the
do
one to
that.
take your angry emails saying, "Where's my Roughneck?"
Yeah,
No, so the Hasty Bake Roughneck, our new barrel smoker, is
Yeah.
now available, and we'll ship in a few weeks, couple
Yeah.
weeks from the time that you order it. A lot of really, really awesome reviews. You got some. I love my Roughnecks. I don't know who said
Perfect.
that, but it's plural, so I can kind of take a wild guess at who
Yeah.
said that.
yeah.
But yeah,
There's
but
only a couple of people so far that have
bought more than
bought-
one.
Yeah,
Oh, it's coming though.
yeah, for sure.
This will take the competition market by storm.
Right.
Guys will be buying 3 or 4 of these for sure.
All right.
And I'm excited to go into the 2023 barbecue, competition season.
Yeah,
Because it will be something that people are going to be really, really hooked on.
yeah,
I had a couple of my pro staffers text me about it today.
yeah.
And one of them does high school barbecue. He coaches the high school
Yeah.
barbecue team in Texas.
Isn't that crazy? That's
It's a thing.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
It's so cool though.
100%, man.
Yeah.
And he's like, he goes, man, I know you guys launched it, but I didn't really take time to look into it. And he goes, you guys have like solved all the issues that we're going to deal with, like teaching the kids how to barbecue,
Yeah.
because you've made this so much easier than any of our drum smokers that we normally use.
Yeah.
So we are very excited to continue to push those out. Got really, really great reviews. We're solving the issues that come up with new
It's
grills.
just growing pains.
It's growing pain. And I mean, we're going to be candid. One of the things with this podcast is we want to be candid with you guys.
Yeah.
It's really easy for a company to go on and, delete bad reviews or whatever. Like,
Right.
we want you guys to feel like you have some fun access to the
Right.
company and to the folks that work for the company. And we're going to be honest with you. And honestly, we've had some shipping issues.
Yeah.
Apparently, UPS hires gorillas. And they like to take a beating on their. But the alternative is shipping them via FedEx and charging you guys like $200. So I
Right.
mean, you'll get over it.
Right.
But yeah, we've had some growing pains, but we're super excited to continue to kind of push this out. We're solving those issues as they come
Yeah,
up.
we're learning, adapting,
totally.
and making corrections and changes where we
Right.
need to.
And not changes, to be honest, not changes on the design so far.
No.
We've had awesome turnout with the design, but changes with the shipping and the packaging and all that.
Yeah.
And Like, we're going to be honest. But as of right now, we would consider an acceptable, this is what you have to figure as a business goes forward. You have to find an acceptable amount of damage when you ship something.
Right.
Is it 1 out of every 100 grills? Is it 1 out of every 500 grills? Right now, we're around 1 out of every 75 grills gets damaged. So I'm pretty content with that. Because we'll replace it, we'll fix it, and we'll move on from there. And we have zero control of what grill is, UPS or FedEx or any hires.
Right.
So we're pretty stoked about that. But as a sidebar, now that Adam's back from peeing,
What? I did what?
No, we're talking about the Roughneck smoker, the barrel smoker. So that was that. Hey, I want to ask you one more thing with you specifically that I think is kind of fun, because I know you're more involved than a lot of restaurant owners that I know. There's some guys that I know that are, they want to be the pit guy 100% of the time. But the majority of the guys are like, I pay my dues. I hire a guy to do that. I show up at 9 o'clock in the morning. I leave at 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah.
That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But the adage, that I would attribute to you for the years that I've known you is no one's going to outwork that guy.
Yeah.
Because you have no problem showing up at 4 o'clock to work that shift if you need to, and you have no problem shutting that thing down and doing the caterings that come, for 8 hours after you do a 12-hour shift and everything else.
Right.
With doing that amount of cooking, doing that amount of lighting fires and cleaning fires and running that, you still find time to be creative, food-wise, outside of food-wise. So it's a two-part question. Is one, how do you find time to be inspired to create and cook in addition to doing all the stuff you do? And then I'll ask you the other one after you answer that.
So I continue to be inspired by other people. I read every cookbook that was here whenever I worked here, and there weren't a lot of like barbecue grilling personalities on to like kind of admire or look at or anything like that. So I find my inspiration now, like from rando stuff that I see.
Like frying donuts on the
like somebody took an onion and peeled it and then cut a slice of onion and then took the onion, which is in layers, and they took out a middle layer, and so they had an outside layer and then a no layer and then an inside layer, and then they put sausage around the outside of it and then stacked the 2 onion layers on top of each other and wrapped them in bacon, so it looked like a bacon donut, but it was actually like onion filled with sausage wrapped in bacon. And I just saw it on the internet and I was like, wow, that looks freaking delicious. Like, I bet I could make that. And so I just like made it and took some pictures of it. I think I gave it to Josh and Chuck on the Edge. I think I brought it up there to them. It's like randomly. So, I get inspired by seeing random things. I get people to ask me to do stuff. I read a lot of old cookbooks. I still love old cookbooks. I like the really old ones. Like, I have an old
the 1944 Good Housekeeping kind of.
The Better Homes and Gardens red and white checkered cookbook is. Every recipe I've ever started is based out of that one. I buy every one I run across, and I give them out to people whenever they're like, I'm looking for a good recipe. I'm like, start here. Like, just literally start here. So old cookbooks. I have an old White House cookbook from 1883 that's recipes, before people cared about making alcohol yourself or like literally making anything. So I like to read a lot, follow what's going on. And then what was the other question?
So the follow-up question to that is, I know that you, outside of cooking, you dabble in some fabrication and stuff as your, you kind of talked about in the past. That's kind of your background. I know out of your storage area that you run a little bit of fun stuff here in downtown. I hope that's not a secret that I just released. But
no, it's okay.
He's like, we'll cut that. Right?
Yeah, I'll cut that in the official. But talk to me a little bit about that, because that, to me, that colors in the fact of the guy who has spent the majority of his life and especially his career in barbecue and cooking and everything else. Like, where do you find your inspiration? Music was one of them. But I mean, you still like to get your hands on metal.
Yeah, I when I first started working here at Hasty Bake. It's so funny, I still consider it here because it is here. So one of my favorite things to do was to fabricate the old stuff. And Hasty Bake burned down in 1980. So like literally all the old drawings for anything previous to 1980 for a company that started in 1948 were gone.
Yeah.
And so I had to take a piece and reverse engineer it. I would measure it and reverse engineer it. And this is pre-computer CAD anything. This is Adam with a tape measure and a ruler and a caliper and pencil and a piece of paper, figuring out how to make these old parts, and then they would have to fit inside. Like build a firebox for a channel that hasn't been made in 40 years. So I love the challenge of that, and I always thought that the Hasty Bake was just so well refined that Grant had thought about every problem. He had run across it. Somebody had complained about it to him enough times that he had always solved it. And so I make rando stuff that makes my cooking life easier. I make some scrapers. I made some different hood handles. I made a big crazy unit called the Boss Hog.
That was fun.
That is a big. It's a big, crazy unit, so that's the only way to describe it. Maybe I'll send you the video of me inside the Boss Hog. Yeah. So it shows you kind of the inside of it.
It's basically a Hastings on steroids.
It's a Hastings. So one of the things if I'm stretching you guys out too long,
you're great.
tell me to shut up. Okay, so one of the things that when I worked here is people wanted a bigger unit, and I said, buy more. And they said, oh, well, I don't want 2. Like, I need more. I'm like, well, buy 3 or buy 4. Like, buy as many Hasty Bakes as you need. Like, you don't need a bigger one. You need more Hasty Bakes. And so people wanted big. Yeah. And so I, in my own fabrication world, was like, okay, can I go big? And so I built the Boss Hog. And the Boss Hog is the footprint of 2 Hasty Bakes, the coal consumption of 1.5 Hasty Bakes, and the capacity of 5 Hasty Bakes. And
do the math on that one.
Yeah.
It
carry the one.
So basically, in the space of less than 2 Hasty Bakes, I could cook the amount of food I could cook on 5 Hasty Bakes with the amount of coal that less than 2 Hasty Bakes actually used. So,
which a lot of Hastings users, and myself included, experiences, we get that and we're like, and I can cook what I can on 4 legacies.
Yeah.
Right.
But I'm really only using the equivalent of 1 legacy firebox to do it.
Not very much coal. So I built it because double line like the 357, right? Mm-hmm. Like that's the way to go for efficiency. But the problem I run into with sheet metal is when you go really big with it, it really wants to warp a lot and there's no structure. So the Boss Hog is a steel frame, like a tube chassis, like a race car that's then skinned in stainless.
I'm sure that thing's really light. Like
it actually isn't too bad. I think it weighed about 450 pounds whenever I was finished with it, and it's made to fit through a standard 30-inch door.
Because you think about things.
And then instead of having a heat deflector, it had louvers, like a set of blinds that were set up horizontally. So when you wanted direct heat, you opened the blinds, and your meat could be seen by the fire. And when you didn't want it, you could close the blinds. You could close the blinds partially or all the way or whatever. And if you closed them all, then it bypassed the heat from the cook chamber and sent it straight out the exhaust instead, so that when you were recoaling or wrapping, you could move it around. Now, was this piece of machinery potentially hard to clean and deal with? Yes. Yes, I think so, which is why it came out of production.
After Unit 1.
Yeah.
Well, I've had some more interest in it. It was ran by a stoker too.
Yeah.
So and I built a double. I'll sell you guys my fire door idea. I had my fire door broke in half. So imagine the top half of the fire door folded in half, and the bottom half of the fire door kicked out as a ramp, so that it ramped your coal into the firebox. That's the way that it worked.
That's the best way to refuel right there.
Right.
Yeah, you didn't have to pull the firebox out at all.
Just
drop the firebox down and number right in. Yeah. So
don't call the fire marshal on us.
Right.
The Boss Hog was in production for a little while. I've got it over in my storage facility. It's a lot. It's a lot to manage.
Yeah.
Even with the stoker tube running a fire, it was still a lot to manage. It's a lot to clean. You cram 5 Hasty Bakes worth of stuff into the capacity of 2. It's a lot of grease. So.
Well, what's interesting to me is as someone who has, you have a fabrication background, right? I mean, that's been the majority of your career before you got into restauranting is fabrication. one of the not one of, but the style of question that we get from a lot of people is like, why don't you do X, Y, and Z? Like, you know, why don't you have a griddle that fits the entire Hastings or all this kind of stuff? And like all that sounds like great ideas in theory.
Right.
And then when you get like wheels on the ground, you talk to someone and you're like, well, I don't know. Do you want a 487 pound griddle that will fit on, like, because that's what it would have to be to span that much space and be able to not warp and do this or that. And so
you're going to have to finance it.
Right. So like all those questions that come up are normally, and this is not bashing it, this is just the world we live in, right? Normally people who do not have a fabrication background. So when you go into someone who's like, well, I mean, I want a Hasty Bake that's bigger and better and does this, you look at that and you're like, well, I can tell you how I did it. And I can tell you how not to do it. And I can tell you how maybe to do it. And I can also tell you it's probably just better to buy 2 or 3 bakes and not, you know.
Grant's whole thing was Grant tried everything.
He was an inventor. He wasn't a business guy. He became one. He wasn't a business guy. He wasn't a sales guy. He wasn't a marketing. He was an inventor.
Right.
He was an inventor, and his father was an inventor. And, you know, the thing about the Hasty Bake is it's short for modern people. But if you look at how tall the average person was in 1948, the Hasty Bake was set up to be the same height as an average person.
Yeah.
You know, whereas again, now it's considered, you know, really short compared to a lot of other units as far as their height goes.
We're just vintage.
Yeah, you're just vintage people.
Well, I mean, it's crazy. You know how.
You didn't drink enough milk growing up.
Well, just in the time you've been with Hasty Bake, how many clones, Hasty Bake clone knockoffs have you seen?
Oh,
right.
Yeah, we see them all the time.
Like
and then you take that over 70 years, 75 years.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
And the thing is that these people are thinking that this is purely an engineered product, right? All we have to do is reverse engineer this, and we got it by the short and curlies. But that's not the case at all.
Right.
Grant Hastings literally cooked on his grills over and over and over, and his friends cooked on them over and over and over, and the design has been refined over the years. The modifications to the units that we use in the restaurant are the only modifications that I would have done to any of the.
And they're only necessary because of the volume and the temps and the time and everything else that you.
I don't know. Tough question.
Yeah.
Tough question. Hard pass.
No, but I mean, we do get that question because sometimes, you know, BurnCo, you'll sell some of the old units, or we'll get them back in here and scratch and dent and sell them, and they'll be like, hey, why is this latch different, or this or that? And we say, well, you know what? When you move the amount of volume and heat and timeline that BurnCo cooks, you have to make some adjustments. There is no backyard cooker in the world that's going to move the type of stuff that you guys are moving.
Correct.
And that's why we don't do it.
Yeah, it takes modifications to be able to make them work. You know, Jason, again, I worked with Jason from the moment I came to work here. And when I first built the units for 18th and Boston, we had a fairly long conversation about how to make them, you know, nice and safe to be able to work well for us inside there. So we added some reinforcements and did some things that are different. But now you got new units, so I don't even, you know, I'm old hat now. There needs to be somebody else. Come knock me off my throne.
There you go.
There you
We'll
go.
work on that.
Somebody may be better than me. I think it should be a girl. I feel like that's a thing.
I'm into that.
Yeah,
We can make it work.
absolutely.
I feel like it should be a girl.
I love it. Well, you know, man, it's a really special thing, and not many companies have really the blessing of being able to say someone who spent time under the roof of the company, a lot of time under the roof of the company, went on and built an entire business model on a product that the company makes. Like, it's not a thing. And dealt with the pain in the ass that was to try to build a business on that. I mean, I know that when you guys went into like 18th and Boston, you probably had to build a bigger hood vent than Tulsa had ever seen.
Yeah.
Well, it all had to be created.
Right.
You know, I mean, if you want to build something, you hire the best people and pay the most money and buy the best thing that you possibly can.
Right.
And that's the best that you can possibly do.
Right.
And that's how you have to make things happen. So.
But it would have been a lot easier for you to say, you know, I'm just going to put a couple cook shacks under this thing in the corner. And
But then I'm everybody else.
100%.
And I'm everybody else. And again, I didn't set out to like intentionally be difficult. I set out to try to make a superior product. You know, our thing has always been real food, real fire, really good. You know,
and a reflection of you.
Yeah.
You know, like there's a business model out there that says find someone who's doing it right and copy them.
Right.
That's fine.
Right.
Your model wasn't find someone who's doing it right. It's we're going to do what we want to do.
Right.
Well, I just wanted to make really great food,
Right.
and it just happened to be that people wanted to buy it, and no one in the in the existing market was doing it. I mean, Tulsa's barbecue scene is gone just crazy.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, it's super cool because I get to look at it and be like, ha ha ha.
Yeah.
Like I feel like I helped to be a part of this. You know,
Absolutely.
I mean, if people don't know, you know, all of us in the barbecue scene are all homies. Like
Right.
all of us are all homies. You don't
Yeah.
make it this long by rolling on your own.
Right.
Like
Right.
we're all homies. We all know each other. We all talk to each other.
I love it when people try to turn one against each
Oh,
other.
yeah.
Well,
They'll go to you guys and they're like, well, I went over to so and so's place and it was complete crap, and you're like, yeah, he's one of my best friends and I talk to him 10 times a
Yep.
week. Like
Yeah.
you're not going to get anywhere bad
Yep.
mouthing somebody who's
Yep.
been through
Right.
the same trenches I have.
Right.
And that's one thing I can say about independent Oklahoma barbecue is there is not that.
Yeah.
If anybody's talking smack, it's definitely not to my face or to people that come to me and tell me about it. So I've always said that if you want to know who's the best, look in the cash register.
Yep.
Because the people who are still here, that's who's the best.
Yep.
So
Yeah, and it changes, man.
That's right.
Changes all the time. But
it does.
there's you guys have some staying power.
I'm
Yeah.
on
And we're
the
thankful for that.
I'm on the crazy end of that stuff. That's
Right?
for
Yeah.
sure. Like, how much longer can I continue to be this lucky?
That's right.
Oh, that's good, man. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, buddy.
We,
Appreciate
you know, as Zach and I talked about kind of retooling and doing the true Hasty Bake
Yeah.
podcast, there was really only one name that was like, if we're going to launch this thing,
Yeah.
we got one guy we need to get in to start this thing off, and that was always you.
Yeah.
So
Well, I really appreciate it. I mean, I love this company. I love this brand. I've been a company man for over 20 years. Even though I don't have to be a company man, I've had people approach me trying to get me to use other products, you
Yeah.
know, and I'm like, do you not know who I
Yeah,
am?
you didn't
or
do
what
very
I
much
do?
research,
Like,
did you?
Like, I know I don't look the part, right? Like
Right.
I've always said, like you would be a much better BurnCo. Even you would be a much
Yeah.
better BurnCo owner than me because if you don't have video, I'm 5'5", 125 pounds. I've always been this big. I do not look the part of a barbecue person, but if you put me with my equipment, doing my thing, then you definitely understand how and why I am what I am. So
that's right. I love it, man.
thank you guys.
Awesome. Well, guys, thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
We're really excited to do some more of these.
Yeah.
And get some folks on here that you know and you recognize and you want to hear some backstory. I think this is a really, really cool just opportunity to get to know Adam a little bit better.
Yep.
Get to know the BurnCo story a little bit better and how it plays into the greater Hasty Bake story, you know, over the history of it. Because really, when you look at it, you know, Hasty Bake's been around for 75 years, but when you break down that history, stuff like BurnCo pairs right along with it.
That's right.
It's part of the history of us.
Yeah, let's not forget. Connor's Corners was first. Sputter. Ken Schaefer.
Yep.
Yeah. Ken, we'll get Ken on here in the next handful
Oh
of
yeah,
episodes. He'll
definitely.
be on
You
here for
definitely
sure.
need Ken. But Connor's Corners was first. JJ, JJ's Gourmet Burger that just now closed down. JJ pays honors to Connor's Corners and said that those were the best burgers in Tulsa before he opened his burger place. And Connor's Corners cooked on Hasty Bakes.
Well, you might have to give me some phone numbers here.
Yeah.
We'll poke around a little bit.
Yeah.
Guys, if you are sticking around, which it looks like the majority of people who started with us
Yeah.
are still sticking around,
Yeah.
so it shows that you are either horribly bored at home
Yeah.
or we might have did something right tonight.
That's right.
Thank you, guys. We'll catch up here in the next few weeks.
Yep.
We got a lot of fun guys coming up here.
That's right.
So
That's right.
we'll see you guys around.
Thanks again.
Thanks. Have a
Thanks,
good one.
bud.